1/3 of the partnership agreement funds. No comparison with the near past. 1.63 billion from the Just Transition program will be channeled to the areas that will be decarbonized, and 714 million for prevention of risks following natural disasters. 3, let us not forget, apart from the previous partnership agreement, the new partnership agreement, we also need to make mention to the Resilience and Recovery Fund, the little cousin of the partnership agreement. Its funds obviously constitute a big development effort. They have timelines of their own. They emphasize on actions related to climate change, digital transition, and societal issues. Overall, we are talking about the biggest package ever that the country has had at its disposal. It's twice as high as the Marshall Plan, and Nikos Papathanasis has two things of equal importance to tackle: working in the new partnership agreement and its uneventful kickoff, and, of course, the pressure of demanding timelines and the big challenges of the Recovery Fund. For all intents and purposes, however, it is a very big opportunity not only to absorb, as we often say in Greece, community funds, but to truly make the best use of them in order to give them the highest possible added value. Ladies and gentlemen, today's event was organized on the occasion of the consultation for Cohesion Policy 2027, and we were well advised to start this discussion already. We have a special committee at the Ministry of Finance, and there are people who are among us here today, members of this committee. They have a wealth of experience in this particular sector, and I trust that Greece will have a very positive and definitely constructive role to play in the negotiation of the new fiscal framework and the new cohesion policy. However, challenges today are not the same as those we were faced with a few years ago. The coronavirus pandemic has passed, but we are in the afterwake. Inflation, geopolitical uncertainties were added to another volatile changing mixture where we already had prominence of green and digital transition. Challenges like these ones necessitate review, re-examination of the cohesion policy, which is something that makes sense. So, speaking today about the future of European policy, in view of the new General Director for Regional Policy, General Director Mrs. Themis Christophidou, the Cypriot Madam Themis Christophidou, I would like to remind you personally that I've been working in the field of these policies, and I've dedicated work for many years on a national and regional level. For 13 years as an MEP, I was also a member of the regional policy of the European Parliament. For 5 years, president of the same committee, and 2 times rapporteur of the general regulation for the structural funds of the European Union. And, of course, line minister for the partnership agreement during a very difficult period, the period between 2012 and 2014. But before I speak to you about how I see the future of cohesion policy, in a few words, let us examine what the European Union priorities are today. First of all, solidarity and social cohesion, especially for less developed countries and regions, which is a foregone conclusion. Number 2, the management of green and digital transition, which is something reflected more intensely in the Recovery Fund. Third, the management of unexpected crises, which becomes an imperative given the pandemic and the energy crisis. And number four, the strategic autonomy of Europe in an environment of increasing crisis, without, of course, underestimating the social dimension to the programs that has been here continuously and uninterruptedly with the support of the European Social Fund. All these are, of course, very important, and there is no question, whether I say so or not, that they will continue to be objectives of the new cohesion policies. I would like, however, and we have discussed this with Madame Christophidou, to add a few thoughts of mine vis-à-vis the new cohesion policy, thoughts that are strictly personal. I haven't discussed them with the competent committee. They emanate from the experience that I had and I've had regarding European affairs and how I interpret change in the European Union. I am talking about three major challenges that may threaten our continent if we do not have suitable funding from cohesion policies and if we do not act promptly. First, competitiveness. America has new technologies to show. China, Korea, other countries can exhibit lower labor costs and a dynamic precisely because of low wages. What does Europe have to show? It hasn't been destroyed, but it could really have negative repercussions had it not found some points to be based on in terms of competitiveness. Nordic countries, Sweden, Finland have done this. They have identified sectors to enhance their competitiveness. Italy, for example, in our neighborhood with fashion, strange though it may sound to you, has managed to find a niche in order to make progress in the global market. Greece too, in the past few years has managed to do that. For instance, pharmaceutical industry, which is developing rapidly and is highly extroverted. Agro-foodstuff, despite the huge problems of the agricultural sector, we have made great progress in exports, and there is room for even more progress and, of course, renewable energy sources. For all intents and purposes, we'll see what our competitive edges are. When I speak about competitiveness, I am not saying that Europe should come and finance our pharmaceutical industry or our agri-foodstuff sector. This is not what I'm saying. I am mainly dwelling on policies concerning upskilling and reskilling. There we should place emphasis, and this is an effort that we have started, and I'm absolutely certain that Adonis Georgiadis will continue at the Ministry of Labour within the framework of the Ministry and the Public Employment Service. Of course, with the help of the Partnership Agreement and the Recovery Fund. So we are talking about the payment by results, which needs to be updated daily and checked and controlled. And I am talking about certification, because there is a gap there which needs to be true and real. We can't have people pretending to be certifying and other people and entities pretending to be certified. The soft actions of the European Social Fund need to be taken into account with great care regarding added value. The second challenge concerns immigration. One would ask, of course, migration and cohesion policies, what's the relation? There is a relation. I believe that the policy of the European Union concerning migration issues has great room for improvement. We can have far better coordination and undertake far faster and prompt action. Today we have 22.6 billion on a European level channeled to actions targeting migration in 7 years. 2% of the European Union. This is tantamount to 2%. This is not acceptable. It cannot be acceptable. And anyway, if one were to say that in the cohesion policies we shouldn't have these actions, I believe they should, we need to include them somewhere else. It is a matter of balance between the general directorates and the European Union. I don't want to elaborate on that any further. However, it can't be that one of the three largest challenges of the decade and the century, in all likelihood, to be tackled financially in this way. That is, to only have 2% of the budget of the European Union. Challenge number 3, after competitiveness and migration, is the demographic issue. Europe has the sharpest problem on the planet. Greece is number 2 in Europe, and by 2030, all forecasts and projections show that this problem will be further accentuated throughout the European Union. Aging population, that is the demographic issue. Therefore, we need cohesion, we need coordination, we need to support families in order to enable them to have more children, all right, but we need also something else, which par excellence has to do with the European Union. It's the work-life balance. That is, actions for kindergarten, for whole-day school, for support, for parental leave, actions that will comply with the standards developed in the past decades throughout Europe. Here, the European Social Fund and the European Commission need to take action. So personally, these 3 actions should be prioritized and comprised in the new rationale. This is merely food for thought that I'm addressing to our team of experts. I have no doubt that its members have precious expertise which will enhance the efforts of Nikos Papathanasis, Dimitris Kalkos, our General Secretaries, and the entire team, so that Greece can proceed to the negotiation with substantial and innovative proposals. Again, having said all these, I would like to congratulate Nikos. I would like to congratulate the whole team on today's initiative. We are collectors of ideas, ladies and gentlemen, ideas that you will contribute. All of them are welcome. We expect you to give us your proposals so that Greece does not only seek support, but can contribute as an old member of the European Union with constructive and creative ideas, enhancing the building of the new cohesion policy of the European Union. Thank you very much.
We warmly thank the Minister. His intervention has been really significant. Now, directly, I'd like to call upon the floor the Minister for Employment, Mr. Adonis Georgiadis, with whom we have gone through 4 very productive years, and we are able to stand before you with the belief that we have done our job correctly under his guidance. Obviously, you are not a guest here. This is your home. Minister, you have the floor. Well, dear Kostis and dear Nikos, my warmest congratulations. I'm here today feeling really touched after 4 years as the political leader regarding the partnership agreement, meeting again the team that we had established. We were in ranking in the 19th position vis-à-vis the absorption. We have been able to conclude successfully the absorption for the 2014 2014-2020 program. We were approved for the 2021-2027 program first, and now it is with great joy that I follow Nikos Papathanasis. I miss you, Nikos, from our daily routine, and you have a very good company, the company of Kostis. You have the whole team, Hatzidakis, whom I'd also like to thank and congratulate for the cooperation we've had. And I'm sure that the partnership agreement is continuing to be in good hands. We have been able to secure higher funds, higher amounts for the regions. I see Mr. Alekos, etc. And we were able to collect much higher amounts. I have to leave you, unfortunately, because I have another obligation to attend vis-a-vis the people with disabilities. But I'd like to share with you some details pertaining to my current portfolio. Greece has to face one of the biggest challenges regarding its midterm financial growth. This has to do with the retraining of our human resources. If we don't manage to do that, our economic growth will come to a halt, because investors are not going to be coming into a country if they can't find the appropriate human resources. And the lack of human resources becomes for Greece one of the biggest issues, as is the case for the whole Europe. But we have giant resources from the RRF and the partnership agreement. And our own responsibility is to put to good use such resources, to make them work effectively, and to have them in order for them to produce the result that the Greek economy actually needs. Since I see Mr. Vucinos, we have the 100,000 euros program regarding skilling, etc., vocational training. We have the VIPA, the Public Employment Service Program, and let us say that we were able to meet the objectives regarding the Public Employment Service. This has been a great success. I was in Brussels a week ago on Monday in the Ministers' Council, and the competent commissioner there, Mr. Schmidt, made a special reference to reskilling and upskilling. The direction we have from the European Commission is to lend an ear to the labour market, and reskilling and upskilling should not be based on a theoretical basis, but actually need to listen to the actual requirements and needs of the labour market. We have already started, Nikos, as you know too well, with the managing authority, Ms. Dandolo, etc. And we had the monitoring committee meeting in Caravel Hotel. We are going to initiate the transfer of all projects that had been signed in the previous period to the new partnership agreement in order to achieve high absorption rates, with the help of social partners and shareholders. And I think that we'll be able to show you actual results in the early next year. Now, vis-a-vis the absorption of the new partnership agreement, I want us to achieve much higher speeds, Mr. Phoebus. I see our partners, Ms. Economou, the whole team with whom we have worked, and of course, Giorgos Zervos and Niki Dandolo. Because behind the partnership agreement, we have people. It's not just about the figures. It's Dimitris Skalkos, Giorgos Zervos, Niki Dandolo, Mr. Phoebus. It's the MOU with Mr. Siadimas and their team, Katerina Economou. People who are working, allowing us to be able to present such results and feel proud about them. And dear Mr. Zavos, President of the Hellenic Development Bank, you your role has been crucial in this period. So I'd like to thank you for the invitation. The Minister for Finance, now I am addressing the ministerial authority. Committed to follow what is needed in my ministry and to make you all proud for being able to work. We trust you, dear Nikos, together with Pelopidas leaders. You are going to complete the JTF plan. So to conclude with, let us never forget that we have Yorgos Stassinopoulos. Whenever you are stuck with something, he's going to give you a solution. So I wish you success. And please remember just one thing. Now, Greece in the past decade was very close at finding itself outside here. You might remember of a stupid referendum in 2015, and there was this reversal. The only proper thing that Mr. Tsipras did was to reverse. Imagine if we were outside the European Union now, what Greece would look like. Nowadays, Greece has a quadruple growth rate compared to the EU average. And we have been able to achieve goals, etc. All this thanks to the fact that we are member states of the EU and the Eurozone. And in order to be that, some of us have supported this idea and were attacked. And we need to be proud as the government of Mitsotakis to be able to bring forward such results and successes for the country. Thank you very much. I wish you success. We warmly thank the Minister, Mr. Adonis Georgiadis. Had it been differently, we would have with us here the Commissioner for the EU regarding reforms, Ms. Elisa Ferreira. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to attend, but we'll have the opportunity to have a video watch. Of course, if she were here, she would hear us thank her because she was managing a critical portfolio in the very difficult years of the pandemic, of the energy crisis. And in that way, the cohesion policy managed to become the necessary financial support regarding Greece, regarding Greek economy. A recent study calculated that if we didn't have the partnership agreement resources support, the GDP of the country would have been burdened by 3.4 billion, 33 billion euros. Now we will watch the video.
My sincere thanks to the Greek authorities for their commitment to continuing this vital debate, and to all of you who are participating. At your inaugurating event in July, I reminded us all of cohesion policy's long and distinguished history of supporting your investments. From the Athens metro to rural broadband for 2,200 remote villages, from 47,000 households with better energy performance to 5.4 million people with better health services. In each case, we have supported Greek projects and Greek investments for a better future for every region in Greece. At your debate in July, I was particularly struck by three key challenges you identified for Greece. First, the impact of demographic decline, and especially brain drain. Second, the impact of globalization. Third, the impact of the twin transition, especially climate change. I fully agree. For me, these challenges underline the value of forward-looking projects and a forward-looking policy. For example, your investments to take Western Macedonia from a hub of carbon-intensive industry to a hub of alternative energy. Your investments also, supported by cohesion funds in new skills, in local businesses, and in the new university, which will become a center of knowledge and an attractor for young people. This is part of your broader strategy of a more competitive and innovative Greece, enabling you to make a success of the twin green and digital transition. Cohesion Policy is supporting your investments with 21 billion euros in the current 2021-2027 programs and will continue to support you in the future. But this raises the question, how can this future support the most effective? How can we maximize the benefits for Greece and for all regions of Europe? In your discussion today, I encourage you to consider three key issues. First, what does it take for every region to face the future with confidence, with a future-proof economic structure? How can we tailor and target support so that every region is building on their own unique strengths and capacities? Second, how can delivery be optimized so that the policy focuses on performance and is delivered in a more flexible way? And I ask a particular question here. How can the policy be better linked to growth-enabling reforms? Because we all know that investments alone are not enough. Third, how can we make the most of the capacities and strengths of every partner, from the various levels of our multi-level governance to local partners and social partners? Another particular question here is how to build capacity at different levels in order to develop and deliver projects. Well, our discussions continue. We will bring together the various strands of debate in the 9th Cohesion Report early next year, and I expect lively discussions at the Cohesion Forum in April. So we welcome your contributions, both now and next year. Let me finish with a reminder that we need convincing arguments from those with practical experience of the policy, because the best argument for a strong future cohesion policy is solid economic results, improved quality of life, and your testimonies on how this unique policy makes a difference for your fellow citizens. Well, I wish you fruitful discussions today, and I look forward to hearing the results. Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
We would like to thank Commissioner Madam Elisa Ferreira for the message that she conveyed. I believe that she broached the concerns that we have in European capitals vis-à-vis the cohesion policy after 2027. In Brussels recently, Mr. Papathanasis, before the General Council, had the opportunity to touch upon these issues and talk about how our country will approach the partners. I believe that the discussion that has started will be highly interesting. We may not have Mrs. Ferreira with us here, physically present, but we have the new General Director for Regional and Urban Policy, Madam Themis Christophidou, from whom we expect a lot, and our collaboration has started in the best of ways. Mrs. Christophidou, you have the floor. I would like to thank the previous speaker and Mr. Hatzidakis, Minister, for his kind words. Good morning, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, General Secretaries, Regional Governors, Mayors, dear and old friends of the Commission here today in different capacities. I'm very glad to see you indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, whoever doubts that there is climate change, Athens has turned into Nicosia. You didn't used to have humidity, Prime Minister, but you do have it now. In your previous meeting in July, you talked about the challenges that Europe is facing in its effort towards the transition to a more green and digital economy. Green transition needs to be an opportunity and not a threat. However, the consequences of climate change are not allocated uniformly in the regions of Europe. We have 6 million workplaces and regions which are based on carbon-intensive technologies. You also talked about demographic decline and the need to have attractive jobs so as to give a future to our most talented youth, to have them find their future here in Greece. Last Thursday, with Commissioner Ferreira, we took part in the Council of General Affairs, whereby 27 ministers agreed that cohesion policy is fundamental for Europe, definitely as the symbol of solidarity, which is the foundation of the European Union. However, this is not only that. As a policy that safeguards and guarantees the operation of the single market, a single market which is based on the effective access from and into all the markets. The free market, in its own right, we have found out, does not impede fragmentation and therefore does not manage to capitalize on the competitive potential of every single region of Europe. Therefore, cohesion policy is the key to our competitiveness in a planet and a global market that becomes ever more complicated for the prosperity and for a good quality of life of all European citizens. I hope that all of us can agree that there's no doubt that the cohesion policy has been definitive in the success of the historic enlargement of the European Union in the year 2004. One of the important presumptions of effectiveness and the dynamics of this policy is that the GDP per capita in the eastern member states has increased from 40% of billion for R&I, research and innovation, 24 billion for the support of SMEs competitiveness, and 11 billion channeled to digital transformation, digital transition. So how would we like this policy to evolve after the year 2027? We in Brussels have also started an exhaustive process of consultation with the member states, the European Parliament, the Regions Committee, the Economic and Social Committee. Commissioner Ferreira has established a high-level group. We have the chairman of the high-level group here today, who will speak to us afterwards, and we speak with all big organizations representing local and regional government. It is clear to everyone that the policy of cohesion is a policy based on which Europe has been established, and it needs to go on being its par excellence policy. It has this rationale of shared management. I'll mention 5 of the main issues that we have diagnosed until today in our discussions. Number 1, Europe is today far different from the time when the cohesion policy was created. The same thing applies to the political and geopolitical environment we find ourselves in. The policy of cohesion focuses mainly on less developed regions, but not only them. In these regions, the needs are very specific and very, very big indeed. At the same time, ever more today, we see formerly developed regions falling into what we call the developmental trap. That is, they are faced with great difficulty in their effort to recover and redefine their role in green transition. At the same time, and especially in these regions, we observe the rise of Euroscepticism because of the resentment caused by the phenomenon I mentioned before. And this resentment is expressed ever more intensely through the election outcomes we've seen in different parts of Europe. Other regions and areas that are more developed and they are hubs of innovation and development find themselves faced with a relatively different new challenge of our times, which is that of housing. According to a most recent study, only 1/3 of the inhabitants of the 60 biggest cities in Europe believe that it is possible for them to find a decent home at a decent price for a decent rent. This has an important cost in terms of political and social terms, and we expect it to be further exacerbated because of the demographic change. So one of the questions broached is the following. Should the policy of cohesion be focused only on less developed regions, or would it make sense, financially and politically speaking, to have the policy of cohesion express the face of Europe in every region, always, of course, in proportion to the needs and the challenges? Question number 2. It is a fact that cohesion policy is the main investment tool of Europe. However, investments in their own right do not suffice if we don't have the necessary institutional bodies to deliver them, implement them. Regional and local authorities implement half of the total of investments in the European Union. How can regions be developed when they are faced with shortcomings and shortages on a local level? Public procurements, for example. The value of public procurements in Europe amounts to 14% of the GDP. OECD and Regions Committee studies show that time-consuming processes of tendering constitute the second most frequent challenge identified by regional governments. So imagine the effect of a reform on a regional level. For example, digitalization of tendering procedures, the improvement of governance and the administrative potential of these authorities will become a guarantee not only for more efficiency and effectiveness, but also for more responsibility and, first and foremost, transparency. Question number 3. The Commissioner has mentioned already some impressive and promising projects of the cohesion policy here in Greece. I don't want to reiterate them for the sake of time. What was mentioned was but a few examples. Looking beyond 2027, what kinds of projects would you like to deliver in Greece, and what do you need in order to implement these projects? The power of political cohesion lies in a customized and targeted approach, capitalizing on the strengths of every region. Smart specialization strategies and the process of entrepreneurial discovery are successful practices of this approach. We already endorse that with platforms and other forms of specialization, but what are the new tools that you actually need in order to strengthen your local-centered approach? Do you need more policy experimentation, to use the English term? And how do we actually put the experience to good use afterwards? Fourth question, I'll mention the question of Commissioner Ferreira regarding whether we would like to improve our performance and efficiency, focusing policy on its performance. One of the ideas emanating from the recent consultations concerns how it is that some of the elements of recovery and resilience mechanism can be useful in planning the future cohesion policy. The European Resilience Recovery Fund, RRF, has started giving its first teachings. Can we apply these teachings or take-home messages to the principles of our policy? One of the advantages of cohesion policy is its local and regional character, while the milestones and objectives of the RRF are related to national policy reforms and they are defined on a national level. How can we actually combine, intermarry the most pivotal features of both approaches? Of course, here we shouldn't forget to speak about adaptability and agility. Whether we want to admit it or not, despite our efforts to program things for the future, the past 3 years have shown us in a painful way that we've never been able to anticipate everything that may come our way, let alone do it for every region separately and specifically. However, policy cohesion proved impressively flexible during COVID and then the refugee crisis and then the the energy crisis. And it's interesting that the Eurobarometer recent research has shown that 81% of Greeks know the basic role that cohesion policy played in the management of the coronavirus pandemic. 81%. We need to retain this flexibility. How is it, however, that we can have flexibility and agility in order to cope with ever-increasing crises and at the same time maintain our focus on long-term strategy, planning and investments? And this is very important. Fifth and last point, simplification. We need, I think that all of you have been saying that, and all member states and all regions keep reiterating that. Fewer regulations, fewer rules, yes, but we need to be clear. This doesn't mean discounts in the fundamental values of the European Union. So the rule of law, combating corruption will go on being pillars. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, I would like to say that times are changing and the cohesion policy needs to change, hand in hand with them, to remain fresh and relevant. The Europe we want to see after 2027 needs to be a Europe that will be both innovative and resilient, because it's not so much the difficult times we are faced with that define our success or failure, but the way in which we react to times of difficulty. Cohesion policy needs to be beneficial in good times, but most importantly, perform its best in times of difficulty. Thank you very much, every single one of you, for taking part in this dialogue. Thank you very much for your contribution, your know-how, your active participation, and thank you for setting Greece in the forefront of this process. The next milestone is the high-level group report and the 9th cohesion report and the cohesion forum that will take place in Brussels in April. Until then, I'm looking forward to discussing with you both today and in the next weeks and months to come your ideas and proposals. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ την κυρία Themis Christophidou. Πολύ σημαντικά όσο μας είπε. Εγώ με χαρά διαπιστώνω ότι δεν είμαστε πολύ μακριά, μην πω ότι είμαστε ταυτόσιμοι στην προσέγγιση μας για το πώς θέλουμε την πολιτική συνοχή μετά το 2027. Πιάνουμε το τελευταίο που είπε για τις αναγκαίες αλλαγές για την επόμενη προγραμματική περίοδο. Δεν υπάρχει πρόοδος χωρίς αλλαγή. Κρατώ την τοποκεντρική προσέγγιση, κρατώ την ευελιξία, κρατώ την απλοποίηση των διαδικασιών και κυρίως κρατώ κάτι που μας απασχολεί. Δεν είναι μόνο το ζήτημα της επαρκούς χρηματοδότησης, είναι το πώς οι πόροι θα φτάνουν στοχευμένα εκεί που υπάρχει μεγαλύτερη ανάγκη. Άρα λοιπόν το να βελτιώσουμε την ικανότητά μας να αξιοποιούμε και να απορροφούμε τους πόρους είναι σημαντικό και πρέπει να μας απασχολήσει το επόμενο διάστημα. Έχουμε ακόμη ένα βιντεοσκοπημένο μήνυμα από την κυρία Andriana Sukova, αναπληρώτρια Γενική Διευθύντρια Απασχόλησης Κοινωνικών Υποθέσεων και Ένταξης της Ευρωπαϊκής Επιτροπής. Το Ευρωπαϊκό Κοινωνικό Ταμείο, του οποίου προείσταται, σε καμία περίπτωση, το γνωρίζετε καλύτερα από μένα, δεν είναι συμπλήρωμα της περιφερειακής ανάπτυξης και του ΕΣΠΑ, είναι βασικός πυλώνας. Η επένδυση στο ανθρώπινο δυναμικό δεν είναι μόνο ζήτημα κοινωνικής συνοχής, αλλά αυτή η επένδυση στο ανθρώπινο δυναμικό είναι και από μόνη της ένας οικονομικός πόρος που πρέπει να το βλέπουμε και ως τέτοιο. Αν είμαστε έτοιμοι για το βίντεο.
Kalimera. Good morning. Dear ministers, dear managing authorities, dear implementing partners, dear partners in general, colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the Greek authorities for organizing today's event, because it is very important for us to hear and listen to your ideas, proposals, and suggestions on the future of cohesion policy. As a Deputy Director General of the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion, I am dealing with the implementation of the European Social Fund Plus, and I would like to pass a few messages. As you know, the European Social Fund is the main EU financial instrument to help people and support the implementation of the European Pillar of Social Rights. The European Social Fund plays a key role in achieving the EU headline targets for employment, education and training, and poverty reduction, as agreed in Porto by the heads of states and governments 2 years ago. These headline targets go to the direction of ensuring that we have an employment of 78% at least of our working age population by 2030, that we have at least 60% of the workforce attending a training at least once every year, and we want to achieve at least 15 million less out of poverty. So for Greece, we welcome the ambitious targets that Greece identified for itself, and I can quote now that at least 71.8% of the population aged between 20 and 64 in Greece should be employed by 2030, that at least 40% of all adults in Greece should participate in education, training and learning every year by 2030, and that the number of people at risk of poverty or social exclusion in Greece should be reduced by at least 7.3% by 2030. With a budget of over 7 billion, of which 5.5 billion is the EU contribution for the 21-27 programming period, the European Social Fund Plus continues to essentially contribute to the employment, social education and skills policies in Greece. More precisely, more than 28% of the total ESF Plus allocation has been earmarked for actions promoting social inclusion, 14% will be directed towards supporting youth activation, and about 13% is dedicated to interventions tackling child poverty. Examples from previous programming periods show that Greece has done quite well. Almost 150,000 persons outside the labor force and more than 400,000 long-term unemployed have received European Social Fund support in 2014-2020 programming period. More than 270,000 persons have gained a new qualification or skill through programs funded by the ESF, while about 35,000 vocational education and training students have taken part in apprenticeship schemes. At the same time, the European Social Fund has provided many measures to address poverty and tackle exclusion, including through the operation of social and health structures. More than 250 community centers function throughout the country, serving as a central point of reference for all the social services to citizens in need. Some of these centers have taken up new responsibilities and provide services to specific target groups, for example, the Roma population and third country nationals. And now we are facing a deep reflection on how the future of cohesion policy should be shaped. So we have seen already so far the European Social Fund, which was created in 1957, has developed and progressed and changed a lot throughout the years. It has gained prominence in areas beyond social and employment, such as health. So, in the last decade, member states were provided with more flexibility to use the European Social Fund Plus to address urgent social challenges, including in emergency, as was the case during the pandemic and the recent energy crisis. The Commission has also created several new instruments, like Recovery and Resilience Facility, Just Transition Fund, Social Climate Fund, which have introduced different ways to manage EU funding and from which we can learn. This only shows that the structure and scope of the European Social Fund and cohesion policy in general will keep evolving in line with emerging challenges, notably related to climate change, which most probably will affect the weakest in society to a largest extent. But climate change is, of course, not the only major challenge which will require investment to be overcome. The combination of an industrial overhaul, increased digitalization and a decreasing workforce will lead to increasing skill shortages. So this is why we are focusing so much effort on people developing and adapting their skills. And let me remind that this year, 2023, is announced as the European Year of Skills, which draws the attention and puts skills in the spotlight of any event. We want to increase participation in vocational education and training. We want to enhance possibilities for working age people to get in education and training, to upskill and reskill. We want to improve partnerships among bodies providing training and the employers who need better skilled workforce. This will be a constant and continuous effort because technological development requires modern skills, and we believe that the European Social Fund there will be an important contribution to all efforts. At EU level, we have already started a very broad debate on the future of cohesion policy. Many countries have organized their national conferences involving wide partnerships to discuss what works with the current legislation, with the current setup of cohesion policy, what ideas, proposals we can get for improving it, and how we should shape the contribution of cohesion policy to development of our economies, societies, and territories. And I'm sure that the work and the discussion today will be a very important contribution to these discussions for the preparation of legislation in the next year and by 25. I want to thank you again for organizing the event. I'm very sorry I couldn't join you because I had other engagements and I couldn't travel to Greece, but I believe that the experience and the broad knowledge that the Greek authorities have acquired in the implementation of the structural funds and cohesion funding will be providing a lot of ideas and responses to a number of questions that we're facing now. So I wish you a very pleasant and a very fruitful discussion today, and I hope that I'll see some of the outcomes of this discussion later. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστούμε την κυρία Σούκοβα, ανέδειξε τα βασικότερα ζητήματα.
We would like to thank Mrs. Sukova, who highlighted many of the important things. She said a lot of things reported in activities regarding the ESF. The pandemic, we believe, highlighted the necessity for high-quality social services. The lesson learned with God is important for us to enhance the resilience of our social systems, not only our economy, and of course invest in human resources as a financial resource through upskilling and reskilling. New programming period. Financially, allow me the word, we have set things in order. Dear regional governors, you have European social funds and about 2 billion euros for inclusion, and the new HRSC program, which is the biggest one in terms of financing. Madam Dandolu, you have a lot of work to do in the immediate future. The time has come to proceed to the host of today's event, the Minister, Mr. Papathanasis, from whom we expect some political positions, a political framework, and if we are lucky today, some news. Well, the news will come after the completion of today's meeting. General Secretaries, Madam General Secretary, ladies and gentlemen, regional governors, representatives of authorities and bodies, dear colleagues, working at the Ministry of National Finance, working in all ministries, President of the Technical Chamber. I believe that Mr. Georgiadis described your potential eloquently, and I'm not saying this as a mechanical engineer. I am saying this, acknowledging that certain jobs need more agility. Mr. Moussouridis, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and pleasure to have all of you here today to attend a very important event focusing on something very important, a topic that I believe will monopolize our interest for a long period of time. I would like to start with what I wanted to say last. On the 28th of May, 1979, in this very room, the accession of Greece to the European communities was signed, dear President. And it was then that Giscard d'Estaing said that Europe could not possibly exist without Greece. At the same time, the then Prime Minister, Konstantinos Karamanlis, spoke about politics. And he said that politics is not a profession, it is a mission, This is how Konstantinos Karamanlis back then looked on politics. And when this is turned into action and practice, then what we have is a prosperity of peoples, and citizens. And what we are discussing today is the prosperity of people and citizens of Greece and other countries, because cohesion policy regards daily living and how it is that citizens can have a better future. This discussion is getting more intense. We have some countries that have been making different estimates, and it appears in the new programming period, Madam General Director, I'm not sure whether cohesion policy will have the same percentage it had in 21-27. That is why it would be truly well advised to go on talking, and you said it very aptly. At the Council of Ministers, this rationale was elaborated on, and it was there that we heard different opinions expressed. Before I start, I would also like to tell you that we are not here today at random. Many years of work have proceeded, and given the opportunity, I would like to congratulate all employees and everyone working for the partnership agreement on the excellent job they have been doing up until today, because it's the work of employees that leads to good outcomes. No minister, no general director or secretary can have good results without people working hard to that end, because it is truly teamwork. Ladies and gentlemen, the European cohesion policy has been a very important tool for the support of the Greek economy. And not only that, critical public infrastructure, important social services, action for the development of human resources of the country, and thousands of business plans were funded throughout the years by the European structural funds. And in effect, they changed Greece. They supported regions and they promoted growth for the sake of societal prosperity. So today's event is the curtain that falls after the important talks of the group of experts, and I would like to congratulate the group of experts on the excellent work they have done up to now, Mr. Moussaouli. And of course, I would like to congratulate the previous Minister of the Ministry of Development and Investments. We've had a structural change, recovery fund, partnership agreement, public investments program, JTM plan, PPPs, all the financial instruments are now under one ministry. However, the previous political leadership, and in particular Mr. Adonis Georgiadis, did excellent job. Mr. Tsakiris, excellent work again. And I would like to congratulate Mr. Skalkos, Madam Mandolu, and Mr. Zervos on continuing the very good work that they had started. I believe that the challenges of our times are such that necessitate far greater speed. And here we have the closure of the program 2014-2020, and Greece should not fail to capitalize on any funds. So, what we want in order to promptly shape the positions of our country vis-à-vis cohesion policy, what we envision after 27, and what the future priorities are, turn around the discussion of the kind of Europe we want. The European Commission started everything by inaugurating a wide procedure of consultation. Greece is present, and with the right alliances, it will fend for its rights. Obviously, in Europe too, we have alliances. With the establishment of the high-level expert group, the negotiation was intensified with the two sessions realized by the Spanish presidency after the participation of ministers competent for cohesion policy. With the beginning of next year, the high-level expert group will submit their proposals, and then we'll have the publication of the 9th cohesion report setting out future changes. Greece, in its turn, organized the deliberations process following the standard that the Commission followed. The experts group consists of persons with a wealth of experience coming from the realms of politics, local government, socioeconomic bodies, and the academic community. And today we'll hear a conclusion report comprising proposals. Ladies and gentlemen, our policy is being planned in an ever fluid and ever-changing international environment of successive crises. The climate crisis, natural disasters, the migration crisis, and emergencies like the coronavirus pandemic. Crises that accentuate inequalities and place at risk the positive outcomes of social cohesion. So, together with this chain of crises, we have another series of challenges shaping our environment. The heightening of regional and intra-regional inequalities, growth, stagnation, the distancing of citizens, and a new wave of Euroscepticism, the dual challenge of digital transformation and green transition, and the experience from the application of new tools like the Resilience and Recovery Fund, RRF. All these need to be incorporated in a multifactorial equation that cohesion policy is called upon to solve after the year 2027. That is why we need to be certain that the funds channeled to that policy need to be proportionately equivalent to the challenge ahead of us. The European Commission concerning EU budget for 2025 ought to take this into account. Euro elections that will take place in May 24 will give us the opportunity to discuss all issues that concern the members of the European Union and, first and foremost, the citizens. Cohesion policy has an indisputably important role to play in the mitigation of frustration, disappointment, and distancing of citizens. The member states, contributors to EU budget, are most of the times strict when it comes to delivery processes and the outcomes of cohesion. We've seen this in the past. They know, however, that only balanced development of the European Union will actually make Europe competitive, resilient, and capable of dealing with challenges. Everyone has a role to play, since in this effort, not only the central administration, but also regions, municipalities, and social and economic stakeholders participate. In the proposals of the EU concerning the EU budget of 2025, we ought to take into account that for the common goals of the Union, the funds channeled to cohesion policy need to be in proportion with the needs that the policy of cohesion is trying to address. The outcomes of the experts and the proposals presented today will contribute significantly to the shaping of national positions and priorities. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2014-2020 partnership agreement is nearing completion. The end is only a few days away. It's worth noting that PA 1420 started being implemented in the whirl of financial recession and is being completed in an ever-changing environment of successive crises. After the economic crisis, we had the health care crisis and then the energy crisis. However, the partnership agreement responded readily and readjusted its targeting to cope. April 2020 to July 2022, the partnership agreement programs during the coronavirus supported employment, financed procurements of health equipment, recruitment of psychologists and social workers in the field of education, supported actions for fishing and energy with 10.6 billion euro overall funds. Specifically in the field of entrepreneurship, the partnership agreement was the one that supported and kept SMEs standing and supported employment practically in the period of the pandemic, with funds that exceeded 14 billion euros together with leveraging. Regarding its delivery, the acceleration of absorption of the past years has led Greece to be steadily in the first places concerning absorption compared to other EU member states. The goal of safe closure of all programs will be achieved. Collective bargains amount to 32 million, overbooking 136%, while expenditure 21.7 billion, that is 92.3%. We have taken all necessary measures and we have promoted all important structural corrective measures so as to have a substantial acceleration where we have some delays in order to have a safe closure of the period. Obviously, we don't want to lose a single euro. Allow me here to dwell on the pivotal importance of good and conducive collaboration with all the members of the Commission and the Partnership Agreement Committee. We all share the same goal. The achievement of this goal will be the measure we are judged by. Greece has no room to lose any funds from the PA 1420, and it will not. We have ahead of us the approval of review of programs, and we are waiting for this, for the closure, in order to proceed to the last management activities. And we're looking forward to a closer collaboration with mutual understanding of priorities, limitations and restrictions to the benefit of the shared goal ahead of us. We are very near, but the time we have is very little. We're almost there. All our efforts in this last period have been turned towards the delivery and completion and closure in order to do whatever it takes and safeguard all the rules and prerequisites so that the closure of the programming period can be a resounding success. But in effect, closure also ushers the beginning for the delivery of the new partnership agreement, the 2021-2027 PA, building on the successes and the lessons learned of the previous programming period, introducing at the same time new elements that will enhance effectiveness and the impact of our interventions in growth. A notable example concerning the work done is the fact that Greece was the first member state to have its PA agreement approved, and we received approvals for all new sectoral and regional programs equally as fast, with an overall budget of more than 26.5 billion. The new partnership agreement reflects the new priorities of the European Commission and responds to the maximum possible extent to the needs and priorities that Greece has and has set, always with the eyes turned towards the new decades ahead of us. Please allow me to dwell on some points. 20% of the overall funds are channeled to actions for the promotion of innovative and smart transformation of the Greek economy. These are actions that support entrepreneurship, innovation, emphasizing on digital transformation, public sector reform, and reform of services rendered. 27% of the overall funds are channeled to green actions. 30% of the total funds are channeled to social cohesion, actions for the increase of employment, support of human resources, improvement of education, social solidarity, reduction of social exclusion. 8% of the overall funds are channeled to big projects that concern transport infrastructure by train, by sea, by air, and projects to improve accessibility. It is worth mentioning that in the new partnership agreement, we have an increase by 2.8 billion euros the funds channeled to regional programs, while new sectoral programs reflect the new demands and growth. New program for just transition. It has to do with decarbonized delignitization, Western Macedonia, 4 areas, Kozani, Florina, Grevena, and of course, Megalopoli, Tripoli, Halia, Gortinia, and Kastoria. A new program for civil protection aiming at the creation of a uniform national system for civil protection and the funding of important investments for the equipment and prevention, management, and early warning systems to be used for natural risks not related to climate and man-made risks, and also fire brigade equipment. The AG's program is equal to the amount of 2 billion euros, a new program for digital transformation and a new program for the environment. At the same time, we are upgrading technical assistance, which is a program necessary for all the other programs to run. Already the activation of PA 2127 is in full deployment. Calls exceeding 7 billion euros have been issued, and we have the approval and the beginning of delivery of projects amounting to 3.7 billion euros. The year that will be starting soon is a definitive one, since the specialization of the programs has proceeded significantly. Well, with the closure of the partnership agreement 2014-2020, we'll have the definitive sum regarding the financing of phasing actions, the ones that will be carried forward to the new programming period. In the committees, we've just had the completion of the discussion regarding budget. On the 13th of December, it will come to the Hellenic Parliament to be passed. There will be a voting on the 17th of December. There, we anticipate that in 2024 we'll have 2.1% primary surplus in Greece and growth 2.9% according to forecasts. A bigger percentage than 60% of growth will come from partnership agreement programs and the RRF projects and programs that are in progress. You understand how important these programs are. Ladies and gentlemen, the past 4 years have witnessed courageous reforms. We've modernized the state to a great extent. Besides, this government is a reform-centered government, and we shall not stop working to that end. For all intents and purposes, we have said that as long as we are reforming the state, as long as we are rendering the state friendly to entrepreneurship, we'll be increasing new jobs and better jobs for all our fellow citizens, young men and women, to face a big problem that we have here in Greece, the demographic decline. The only way to have a better outlook on the future, to create better conditions for our fellow citizens and the new generations, is to persevere and continue along this path. Our growth policy and follow faithfully, as we have learned to do, our fiscal target and objective, to comply with European regulations, as we have learned to do, and finally to achieve what we have promised. A Greece that will be better, a Greece that will have more jobs to offer, a Greece that will bring back the Greeks that are now abroad, and a Greece that will create a better future for our young men and women. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you warmly, Minister, because you set out the contour, the regarding what has been done in the programming period 2014-2020 and what the future will bring 2021-2027. And as to the period after 2027, you set the direction that our country will follow. We can be demanding and at the same time be cooperative. We need to know what we're after and at the same time grasp the broader picture, recognizing that our country is not only part of Europe, but the entire Europe is part of an ever-changing environment. Now, all this discussion cannot be in a vacuum. We need to have documentation, and we mentioned quite a few times the high-level experts group that has been established by the European Commission. And this has been the example that we followed ourselves in order to have our own experts group, whom I'd like to personally thank wholeheartedly, but we do have the pleasure to have with us here today the president of the high-level group, Professor Andrés Rodríguez-Pose, whom I'd like to ask to take the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So, Kalimera, dear ministers, dear Madam Director General, dear friends and colleagues, and I have a presentation that I hope it can be put on the screen. I'm going to talk to you today as president of the high-level committee that is dealing with the future of cohesion and cohesion policy in Europe. And I want to clarify something. It has been highlighted already several times here that this presentation, this report, is going to come out sometime in February, right before there's going to be the cohesion report published by the European Commission. So at the moment, I'm talking in just a personal condition. I'm not talking as the whole of the group. Having said that, we are moving towards reaching our conclusions. We'll have our last working meeting before the final meeting to wrap up the report. That would be next week in Brussels. I'm glad to see that some members of the committee are also here, and I also like to welcome the members of the Greek committee that have prepared such a nice report. So what I'm going to try to do is to go over some reflections that we have put together in the committee, in the Cohesion Policy Committee, and try to make sure that how they look and sound, how they resonate in the case of Greece as well. Let me start with what we are doing. First, what we are trying to do is ask the fundamental questions. Why? Why do we need, in Europe, cohesion, not cohesion policy, cohesion more than ever? What should cohesion and cohesion policy as a result of that look like? How should we do it? And as part of the how, with whom should we collaborate? Which are the synergies that we need to have with other policies? And just to give you a preview, we are getting some key messages that seem to be coming out constantly out of the work of the committee that we are having. The first one is that cohesion is first and foremost to reduce disparities within the European Union. By reducing disparities, we are aiming to strengthen the position of Europe in the world. We need to harness cohesion to drive the European project forward. This is something that Themis Christophidou has highlighted very, very strongly, and your minister has also done just a moment ago. And it should be a policy for growth, it should be a policy for equality, and it should be a policy for opportunities. If we increase growth, we'll have more equality and more opportunities. If we increase the opportunities and the equality, we'll have more growth. They are self-reinforcing. And as a result of that, it should be a policy for all people in Europe that are not fulfilling their potential wherever they live. It should be a policy that aims to unleash potential, address development traps, and create opportunities, and it should be a policy that is place-based, is adapted to the conditions in a place-sensitive way. A policy without borders that builds on strong institutions, and as a result of that promotes the simplification of the policy, and also a policy that generates synergies with other policies in Europe, but also at the national level, at the regional level, and at the local level in order to achieve success, which is actually measured by increasing the well-being of people in Europe, wherever they live. And let me just start with the first question, the why. Why today, in 2023, and beyond 2023, beyond 2027, we need cohesion more than ever? And one of the things that you might want to have realized is that in Europe we have a problem. Let me start with the good news. Over the last 2 decades, the world has done very well. In fact, what we have seen is a period of unprecedented growth, but it has been highly territorially concentrated. This is a map what you're seeing there of growth between 2000 and right before the pandemic started. Measured GDP per capita at subnational level, at the finest level that we can put in the world. And you can see that in dark blue, fundamentally in China, but also in North Kazakhstan, what we have is places that have grown at levels that are above 8% per annum. That's phenomenal growth. That's a fantastic catch-up. And anything that is in light blue is levels of growth of more than 3% per annum. The risky part is that you have some ochre colors. Those colors over there that you can see there in orange, ochre, those are places that have today levels of income and GDP per capita that are below what we had 2 decades ago. These are out of 8 billion people in the world, about 640 million people, most of them in Africa and in Latin America, but also a significant percentage of them living in Europe. In fact, Europe, the problem Europe has is that it hasn't shared this massive expansion of prosperity, that the best performance has come fundamentally from Central and Eastern European countries, to a certain extent also as a result of the investment that the European Union through cohesion policy has done there. But you can see there in the map in black, those are the places in Europe that today have lower levels of income than they had 2 decades ago. And unfortunately, most of Greece is there. So what we have is that Europe cannot afford to keep on lagging behind. We need to forge ahead to improve our levels of growth, to increase our income, to increase our employment, to increase our productivity, our innovative capacity, in order to make sure that we keep our place in the world, in a world that you all know has become far more turbulent. We need to tap into the untapped potential that is across the whole of Europe, and this is something important. And what we have done until now, which is to a large extent, through national policies, try to rely on the dynamism of our big cities, is not enough. Of course, we all want our big cities to do well. We want Athens to prosper. But Athens alone, or Paris alone, or Madrid alone, or Lisbon, or Stockholm, do not suffice. They generate 1/3 of the growth. Many of them are doing well, but not all of them are doing well. We cannot bet on one horse. We need more horses. And 2/3 of our economic development comes from other places. Intermediate cities, small cities, towns, rural areas, many of them are doing well, but many of them are also lagging behind and not fulfilling their potential. So we need to promote economic development in those places for the sake of, first, keeping our place in the world, but also because Europe, and it's in our blood, we cannot tolerate inequalities, stagnation, or having regions that are trapped and stagnating for a long time. A second reason we need cohesion today more than ever is to drive the European project forward. It might not seem like that, but Europeans have never had it so good. We have witnessed since the formation of the European Union, the European communities before, since the 1950s, the last 70 years, the period of longer prosperity, longer equality, and longer peace that this continent has ever received. And this is under threat. This is under threat for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is the growth of inequalities within our midst. I like to put this map. This is a simple map in which you have two colors. It's long-term, it's growth over the last 30 years, and anything in dark green is overperforming regions, which simply means that you grow above your national average. Anything in light green is that you grow below the national average. Now look at France. There you have 22 regions. How many regions in France have grown over more than a quarter of a century above the average? If you hadn't seen the map, you would say probably 6, 7, 8. No, it's only one, which is the Ile-de-France, the region of Paris. And you would say, well, France is perhaps the exception. No, you'll take a look at the map. France is the rule. You look at Greece, and you have more or less the same result. It's only Athens growing above the average. So in that respect, what we're having is polarization within our countries, with some cities doing very well, but that wealth not generally expanding to the rest of the country, and that is creating a rise of problems. The first one is it creates risks. The first one is this economic risks. When we have a lot of inequality, it means that we are not fully using the potential of all our regions, of all our territories, in order to make sure that we fire on all cylinders. We are, as a result of that, also developing within our midst sheltered economies, economies that depend very much on transfers and not on their capacity to compete in the market. And we cannot afford that. We need to also invest to make sure that the bottlenecks that prevent these places from growing are addressed. But we also have, as important social and political risks that will become, if we don't do anything, also economic risks. That there's a rise in discontent in lagging and neglected territories. We don't have to go long ago. This is brewing for quite some time, for the last 10, 15 years. But last week we had elections in the Netherlands. And the main party is a party that just 5 years ago, its second point in the manifesto was, let's get rid of the European Union. So we have something that is worth fighting for, and this is under considerable threat, and is under considerable threat fundamentally because there are a lot of parts of Europe that are not dynamic enough and not allowing citizens to develop their opportunities to the full. This is the situation we have in Europe. This is the growth of Eurosceptic vote that we have had since the year 2000. It has grown massively, especially after the crisis, and it has kept on growing. The data stops in the year 2022. 2023 has not been as good. Today, more than one quarter, 27% of Europeans are voting for parties that are Eurosceptic. Parties that actually want the demise of the European Union represent about 15% of the vote. And that has stagnated mainly since the Brexit vote, because the Brexit has shown that being outside of the European Union is actually very, very cold. But this is when we translate it into maps, and you can see that anything in dark colors, in yellows or in reds or in ochres, is places where support for Eurosceptic options are above the average in the European Union. In some cases, when you put all together moderate and radical Eurosceptic parties, you get more than 50% of the vote at the moment. So, and on top of that, what we have is a social, legal, and identity challenge. The first one is that we in Europe, we are certainly very much, it's ingrained in our blood, in our DNA, this whole idea that we need to be more cohesive. That cohesion is a fundamental factor of what it means to be Greek, or what it means to be Italian, or what it means to be German or Swedish, and what it means to be European. And we need to protect that. And this is something that is reflected in Article 174 of the treaty, which says cohesion policy is a policy for development, but it's also a policy that, by promoting development, should bring greater cohesion and improve the opportunities and the quality of life of people wherever they live in Europe. So that's why. Now the question is, what? What should cohesion policy do in order to address the main challenges that we have at the moment? Let me start saying that this should be a policy for development more than growth. It should be a policy for equality, and it should be a policy for opportunities. I have to start with one thing that I think is a predominant view in many parts of Europe. Cohesion is not a support policy. Cohesion is not a compensation policy for disadvantaged regions. Cohesion is a policy for investment. The idea that we have to invest in Europe because more or less wherever we are in Europe, there's significant potential that is untapped. But if we invest in those places that have been more vulnerable, that have been left behind, that have been stagnating, and we manage to make those places grow and develop, as a result of that, we'll have automatic cohesion and we'll reduce disparities. And by having a more equal territories, we will also grow more as Europe as a whole. So both things, on the one hand, greater development and cohesion as a development policy, but cohesion as a policy to reduce inequalities, reinforce one another and achieve growth. It's also in this raison d'etre to identify in ours the potential of every territory. As I said, it's not that we can rely on just a series of territories. And it's not that in Greece we can hope that development in Paris or development in southern Germany is going to promote growth in Greece. Even in Greece we have seen the development of Athens is not enough. And there's significant potential. Who would have said that Eastern Poland or parts of Slovakia just 20 years ago had any potential for development? The condition they were on was significantly worse than anything Greece has ever experienced in its recent history. And yet, they have been highly dynamic territories. This shows that there's enormous potential in Europe and that cohesion policy should help unlock that potential in order to achieve economic development and growth while promoting equality and equalities in opportunity. So if we are going to define what cohesion policy should be, it should be a policy for economic development, aiming to mobilize economic potential of the less developed and falling behind regions of the EU, promoting convergence and greater equality and prosperity and opportunities for all, for everyone in Europe, wherever they live. It should be a policy for all, and I keep on highlighting all these points because I think they're fundamental. Cohesion has up to now rightly focused on the less developed regions of Europe, and it should continue to do so. National policies, by contrast, very often have put horizontal policies, have become horizontal, but when you look at territorialize them, they are policies that very often already promote the most dynamic areas. And there's a problem that we have a lot of territories in Europe that have fallen in between the cracks. Territories that were once prosperous or were doing well or were catching up and then start to stagnate and then go in reverse in some cases. And the problem is that they don't do it for a couple of years or they don't do it for 3 years. They become stuck in what Themis has called a development trap. And this is something that we are seeing across the whole of Europe. This is a map, and we measure it in different ways. But this is the map, I brought the years in a development trap. Between how many years a region in Europe, this is at NUTS 3, has been stagnating, well, growing below in terms of GDP per head, employment and productivity relative to its performance in the past, the performance of the regions the country is in, and the performance of the rest of Europe. And if you look at the dark red, that means that out of a maximum of 20 years, the country has been, 19 years, the country has been stagnating, the region has been stagnating at least 17 years. And then look at France. You see Paris in light red and pink, and then you see in very dark red everything surrounding Paris. Look at parts of Italy. Look at parts of Greece, Epirus, for example. These are places that they have been stuck, not moving anywhere for a long time, and the citizens know that. And the citizens are becoming unhappy, and as a result of that, are showing that their discontent not just with the European project, but with a lot of other issues that we deal in our midst. So in that respect, we need a policy that helps Europe to fire on all cylinders. Europe cannot be a plane with 4 engines aiming to fly on only 1 engine. We need our medium-sized cities, we need our small cities, our towns, our rural areas, we need our declining regions, we need our peripheral regions to actually do well, to mobilize their potential and become competitive again, or become competitive if they were never competitive. We cannot leave any stone untouched. We cannot leave any potential untapped. So, in order to do that, we need a policy that doesn't break with the past. There's a lot of good things that the policy has done, but also brings in new dimensions. The policy has fundamentally targeted, until now, the less developed regions of Europe. It has had one static criterion, which is the whole idea of GDP per capita. If you had a level of GDP that was 75% or below the average of the European Union, you got the highest level of support. There should be continuous support to those regions that are the less developed regions of Europe, and that should be kept. But as was highlighted before by Themis Christophidou, we cannot just wait until some of our stagnating regions become poor, become among the poorest in Europe, because then it's too late. So we need also dynamic criteria, and also to look into help regions escape from that development trap. How can you make a region, regardless of whether this region is less developed or a transition region, medium levels of development, or even more developed, create the conditions to become competitive again? And then Europe has a serious problem in its midst of lack of opportunities. There are many places in Europe, poor, rich, in levels of intermediate development, that have serious problems of poverty, social exclusion, unemployment, long-term unemployment, and this is something that needs to be addressed. So what we need to do is to recognize that there's this plurality of problems, that they need different solutions, and we need to provide, or we will need to provide support. Well, more than support, I don't like the word support, investment, to address those problems wherever they are. So one of the things that we are pondering on proposing is to have this diversity of objectives. First, keep on helping the regions with the lower levels of development in Europe, those that are at the bottom of the scale, to make sure that by investing in issues like more infrastructure, better human capital, better technology, more innovation, better institutions, they can move up the scale. But we also need to focus on the development trap regions, the regions that have been stuck in low levels of economic dynamism, in order to make sure that they can change. They can, using the starting points where they are, they can become dynamic again. And third, we need to fundamentally address the problem of poverty, social exclusion, the lack of opportunities that many people in Europe are suffering wherever they are. And my suggestion, and this is only a suggestion, is that these 3 criteria should be non-exclusive. That if a region is poor, is non-dynamic, and it has serious problems of, let's say, lack of opportunities, it should receive the highest level of support. But that the level of support is commensurate to the intensity of the problems on these 3 dimensions. How should we do it? And this is where we need to start getting into the more the nitty-gritty. We need a policy that is place-based, that is sensitive to the conditions of different territories and where they are stuck. We cannot reinvent the wheel. We cannot try to make sure or try to make that every single territory in Europe becomes a Silicon Valley, because it never works. We need to start from where they are, improve the conditions locally in order to transform that territory completely and make it far more competitive, which is, by the way, what the Silicon Valley has done several times in the past. So this implies unleashing regional capabilities. Different regions have different strengths, different weaknesses, different bottlenecks, different ecosystems in which they operate, and we need tailored approaches to start address those bottlenecks and improve those ecosystems. We need to embrace change. Regions must evolve, they cannot keep still. Diversifying and advancing their activities for sustained prosperity. That means that we need to start from where they are, but make them move to areas where they can move, to sectors in which to which they are related and is plausible to move, while at the same time improving their complexity, or the complexity of their activities, and their technological dimension. That implies we need to reject one size fits all. We cannot, and Brussels cannot, decide for all of us. Brussels needs to set the guidelines, the rules, but then it needs a concerted effort from all of us, implying that we need to adapt the policies to the characteristics, to the ecosystems, to the problems of not just every region, but most, I would say, groups of regions. And as a result of that, we need to combine horizontal and territorial approaches throughout. I'm just going to develop a bit more this last point. In terms of horizontal approaches, we cannot reinvent the wheel, but it's important to highlight that any type of investment should focus on the three dimensions that economic growth theory has always focused on, which is physical capital, mostly all types of infrastructure, human capital, so skilling and reskilling, education, training, and the like, innovation and entrepreneurship, so making sure that we put the basis to create new things, to adopt new things, absorb new ideas, and also as a result of that to increase productivity. And this is important. I think where Europe is actually being pioneer, we also need to make institutions, governance, and capacity building an important pillar of the policy. If we don't have the right institutions, no matter how much we invest in infrastructure or how much we invest in human capital, very often those policies are likely to fail. And these are all mutually reinforcing. I always like to say that development is like a table. If we don't have the four legs in place, we're going to have a table that is always going to fall if you put your glass in the right place of the table. And I see that I have about 4 minutes I'm going to try to reach. It has to be a territorially targeted approach, adapting policy to local ecosystems, which does not imply dismissing the local economic potential, but working with that local economic potential in order to transform the region and the economic activity in the region into something new and something far more competitive. And this is something that can be done, and there's a lot of research that is being promoted on which are the main sectors in every region, which are the related sectors in every region, and where can we have the best synergies, not just in terms of local sectors, but within the rest of Europe. This is a map for Paris, so the regions that can create the best synergies and connection for the development of Paris, and this can be done for every single region in Europe. It has to be a policy without borders. Borders are costly. National borders actually undermine growth. And despite the fact that we have the 4 freedoms within the European Union, borders still represent, in some cases, a loss of 6% of GDP across the whole of Europe. So we need to also make sure that internal borders, but also external borders to the European Union, places that are dealing with serious problems because there's a war in Ukraine as a result of the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Your minister highlighted before the problem of migration. Not all regions in Europe face the same challenges with migration. Need to be supported in a different way than the others, because these are challenges that not only affect those regions, affect all of us in the whole of Europe. So we need to concentrate on border regions, avoiding again with this one-size-fits-all, and transform existing borders into bridges. And then I'm just going to highlight 2 points very briefly, which I think are important, which is which policy should we work with? And one of the great advantages of cohesion policy is that it territorializes and looks at the problems from a territorial perspective. This is unique in the European Union, and it's unique, I would say, virtually everywhere. And this is a great advantage that we should play on. What I'm going to start saying is that cohesion is too much of an important problem to be dealt by cohesion policy alone. Cohesion policy cannot deal with cohesion. And the European Union and national governments are implementing policies that in some cases might exacerbate the problems of cohesion, but by exacerbating the problems of cohesion, by making sure that the costs and benefits are distributed in a very uneven way, might undermine the problem of the policy. Let me just give you an example. I'm going to jump into this map. This is a map of vulnerability not to climate change, but to the green transition. So Greece, and we have seen it, it's undeniable. Your minister said it a moment ago. We saw what happened in September in Thessaly with the floods. Is going to be one of the places, and all research shows, in Europe that is more vulnerable to climate change. But in order to have and address the problem of climate change, we need a green transition, and Europe has given itself a very ambitious green transition. It's leading the world with the objective of, by 2050, having 0 emissions, and that implies significant direct changes, and it implies significant indirect changes. And those changes would bring, on the whole, benefits in the long term. But in the short term, it would bring benefits and costs, and those costs are going to be very unevenly distributed. When you do the analysis, anything that is in dark blue is highly vulnerable to the green transition. And look where the dark blue is. Look where Greece is. Look where Central and Eastern Europe is. Look at where Spain and Portugal are. Look at where many parts of Ireland. This situation might brew, and is already brewing. We've seen it in the Dutch elections, for example, last week, a sort of green discontent. Because in some places, and sorry I mentioned Thessaly before, it doesn't rain but it pours. In places that are already lagging behind, that are falling in some cases into a development trap, then you have to face the bigger costs. And people tell me, yes, there are a lot of opportunities of the green transition, and I agree. But many of the opportunities are going to come through research and improvements in research, and they are going to be capital intensive. And guess what? 75% of all regions in Europe in 2019 did not produce a single green patent. So there's going to be an uneven distribution. So if we want a green transition, we need to pay attention to the whole impact of the policies. And when I say the green transition, I say the digital transition, the demographic transition, innovation policies, defense policies, and policies that are developed not just at the European level, but at the national level. So there's a need to work together. I said, and this is important, cohesion is too important an issue for Europe to be left alone to cohesion policy. But the green transition, the digital transition are too important to not consider the territorial dimension. We cannot fail. We have just one opportunity, and that means that cohesion policy needs to work together with all these other policies to help them achieve their goals, but these other policies should also contribute to transition because they're mutually reinforcing. And we can only do that, and I'm going to wrap up, by building better institutions, which is not just improving capacity building, but also making sure that we improve the capacity of organizations to work, that we improve the governance on how there's a coordination in a vertical way from the regions or the localities to the regions, to the national governments, and to the European Union. But also it's not just vertical. How within the European Union, and this is not just a problem of the regions and the countries, the different policies and the different funds coordinate together and go in the same direction. How do we create those synergies? And that implies improving governance, making sure that cohesion is institutions are an essential part of cohesion, and also simplifying the policies and the goals of the policies. One of the problems we have had is that the reform of the structural funds in 1989 created a very clear framework. But 1989 was almost 35 years ago. And since then, there has been a lot of transformation in Europe. And with that transformation, what we have seen is the number of funds, the number of projects have been multiplied, and it has created a complicated system that needs streamlining, needs better, and above all, it's not just better definitions, it's not just new ideas and clearer funds, but it also needs a better governance in order to make sure that it works. And there we need to address what are the problems of institutions across Europe. We need to address what are the problems of governance, because if we do that, we will address an important problem, which is that cohesion, lack of cohesion, and growing polarization is undermining our capacity as Europeans to have our voice in economic terms, in social terms, in political terms in the world, but more importantly, that is undermining the capacity of all Europeans, wherever they live, to actually deliver on their full potential and increase their well-being and welfare. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Pose. This was indeed a very informative presentation. All of the almost 50 slides. Νομίζω ο κύριος καθηγητής...
I believe that the professor broached all the right matters, and he highlighted the issue of balanced regional growth in all regions of Europe. He related that to the rule of law and the sentiment of disillusionment or disappointment of European citizens in certain regions and areas of the European Union. And in this way, he placed cohesion policy in the forefront of all European discussions. Dear Alekos, Kritikos, as president of the experts committee, as we said before, on a national level, we have our own committee. Dear Alekos, you don't have 50 slides. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning from me. Before I proceed to the presentation of our report, I would like to thank on behalf of the team, the Deputy Minister of Finance, Mr. Papathanasis, and the General Secretary for Partnership Agreement, Public Investments, and dear friend Dimitris Kalkos, who had the inspiration of this effort, and he encouraged us while we pursued the effort. I'd like to thank them for the great honor they made us and the great trust they placed in us by appointing us members of the expert group for the future of policy, cohesion policy after 2027. Ladies and gentlemen, our report is the outcome of collective work. The 14 important persons that I had the honor to coordinate served for decades, and some of them are still in the front line of the promotion of this great European policy as elected members of the European Parliament and regional or local government, as academics, or as people working for the Greek administration. Well, most of them combine more than one capacities. Our group owes a lot to the Pantheon University Institute of Regional Development that decisively contributed to our work and to the compilation of our report, with Yannis Psycharis, member of our group. And things are in order to members of the ministry that took part in our work, people who've spent decades on end dedicated to the pursuit of cohesion policy, people who are truly praiseworthy. I believe that I can show you our group, everyone on the group. I omit myself. Yorgos Yannousis, member of the European Commission, former secretary of PA, Spyros Stathopoulos, higher executive of the European Parliament and former PA Public Investments Secretary, Kostis, general director of Greek production and former general secretary for PA and public investment, Yorgos Ioannidis, academic, member of the Fiscal Council and former special secretary for ESF, Panagiotis Korkolis, coordinator of Institute One and former general secretary of PA and public investments, Mrs. Irodi Kratsa Tsagaropoulou, former MEP and regional governor of the Ionian Islands, Mr. Lazaros Kirizoglu, mayor of Abelokipi, Thessaloniki, and president of the Central Union of Municipalities of Greece, Mr. Panagiotis Liargovas, university professor and former head of the Budget Council of the Greek Parliament, Mrs. Eleni Mariatou, General Secretary of the Association of Coastal Regions of Europe, Mr. Yorgos Michailidis, consultant, advisor for growth and former professor at the University of Thessaloniki, Kostis Mousouroulis, former minister, former General Secretary for PA and Investments, and for many a year, a higher executive of the European Commission and especially the General Directorate for Regional Policy, Yorgos Petrakos, professor at the University of Thessaly, Central Greece, and former General Secretary as well for PA and Public Investments, Mr. Apostolos Kritikos, Regional Governor of Macedonia and Vice President of the Regions of Europe, and Yannis Psychairis, Professor at the Pantheon University and President of the Institute for Regional Growth. Let us now proceed to the presentation of our report, starting by stating the firm conviction of our group, according to which the principles of social cohesion constitute an institutional acquis of the entire course of the European Union since its establishment. We need to safeguard this acquis and to make it guide us in the pursuit of a cohesion policy for the year after 2027. The financial and social growth of Europe, as was repeatedly mentioned by previous speakers, needs to be free from inequalities, undermining the European edifice. The goal of cohesion policy needs to go on being what the Treaty for the Functioning of the European Union necessitates, that is, the reduction of differences between different regions in terms of development and reduction of delay or lagging behind of regions with disadvantages. In the midst of conflict and successive crisis, ladies and gentlemen, cohesion policy is becoming more important than ever because it is called upon to be an embankment to protect us against the repercussions of increased crisis, insecurity, but first and foremost, Euro-skepticism that undermines the dynamic course of the European Union. Cohesion policy ought to showcase its importance in the European way of life, the support of social acquis and systems of security and safety for all European citizens. A very important turn of events in the past few years was the increase of funds in the budget of the EU for the funding of the RRF, 2% of the EU GDP, which was inconceivable before the COVID, and of course the undertaking of equal funds for rolling out. If this is continued, then this will be historic in European unification. The experts group hold the firm conviction that the great challenges facing our continent, mainly climate change, threats for the competitiveness of European industry, from the Biden law across the Atlantic, the promotion of digital and green transition, migration, and the demographic decline, all these challenges and the need to tackle them necessitate the increase of the EU budget for the period after 2027. It is absolutely necessary to have RRF continue and, of course, to safeguard the cohesion fund that comprises both the RRF and structural funds, so the percentage allocated to cohesion needs to be safeguarded in the multi-annual framework. It shouldn't elude our attention that the repercussions of a reduction of funds for the next period will lead to a great burden financially, and it will lead to uncontrollable repercussions in Euroscepticism at a period of time that is crucial for Europe, especially for not the anteportum, but the problem that is already here with climate change. The experts group believe that a new fund is needed for the prevention of natural disasters and their impact on climate. The European Sovereignty Fund will be important. We need to point out that the funding of initiatives in order to manage challenges that are common for all member states and regions will need, of course, to cover the entirety of European territory, providing for the sufficient support of less developed countries, regions, areas, so that they too can actually follow the pace of those regions and states that are stronger in terms of development, so that they can participate equally in all efforts. Within this framework, the group of experts believes, Madam Christophidou, that it would be opportune for the European Commission to have the appraisal of regional policies of regions, précision de l'impact régional. You need to revisit it. Regarding the relation between the structural funds and the RRF, irrespective of the differences we see among them, the big picture at the moment is that it has to do with a cumulatively very important and intercomplementary financial package with which the European Union is endeavoring to tackle the needs for balanced growth. For reasons of increase of efficiency of funds, the expert group believes that in the future it would be useful to have a re-examination and a tidying up of these instruments in order to enhance their complementarity and do away with the duality that we observe in developmental interventions as we see them today. Because for the period after 2027, cohesion policy needs to capitalize on the advantages of structural funds and RRF and to avoid their failings and shortcomings or mitigate them. So the Resilience Recovery Fund will need to capitalize on the positive acquis of the structural funds that are not here today. The multi-annual programming aiming at regional convergence and balanced growth, a territorial dimension, which is the cornerstone of cohesion policy, the multi-level governance, subsidiarity, partnership agreement, and the public process of programming, as well as shared management. Furthermore, the experts group carefully phrased the reservations phrased by the European Union and the Court of Auditors regarding the RRF disconnection from executive expenditure of projects and actions. The structural funds, in their own turn, will need to integrate the positive aspects introduced by the RRF, that is, simpler procedures, avoiding today's complexity that leads to important delays in the absorption of the funds allocated, the fast disbursement of funds to the member state. This is something that the RRF has been doing. Disbursement of funds to member states, and what remains is to see what happens to the final beneficiaries, an emphasis on reforms as constituent ingredients for all growth interventions to the extent that they are directly or indirectly related to the funded investments and actions. In the view of the group of experts, a common disadvantage to both financial means, facilities, RRF and structural funds, has to do with the enactment of inflexible percentages that they are called upon to execute. Among other things, we talked about a single document for programming that will need to be enacted, covering what has to do with PA and operational programs, including a first list of projects or actions. On the basis of experience, recent and older, the group of experts believes that the approval of programming texts from PA and RRF needs to be carried out only by the Commission, as it happens today with a partnership agreement. And we don't think that they should be approved by intergovernmental bodies, as it happens with RRF, because this leads to delays and procrastinations during the initial approval and possible modification without seeing any added value up until today. The group of experts also estimates that the maintenance and extension of intergovernmental processes as against the community method and the enhancement of supranational bodies like the Commission is not an approach that promotes European integration. The group of experts proposes to the Greek authorities and the Commission the re-examination of all procedural steps from scratch, provided for by the regulations, in order to have a full and a clear picture of the true value of every single constituent. The group of experts believes that the policy of cohesion needs to enhance its locality of approach, support with practices that will reduce inequalities regionally or interregionally, and specialized policies to better serve specific areas like mountainous areas and, of course, islands. Closing, the group of experts would like to state its firm conviction that cohesion policy is much more than money. It's a culture that integrates into a single purpose the objectives of member states, regions, society, citizens, all stakeholders in the entire European Union. It is a policy, it is an approach which needs to develop what we should call Affectio Societatis, which was not mentioned before. That is a sense of belonging to society with common history, common past, common problems, common prospects for the future. Within this framework, our proposals, ladies and gentlemen, are proposals of Greek experts to the Greek Ministry of Finance, and therefore unavoidably, the criterion is the promotion of specific interests of our country and a group of countries that our country pertains to. But we are also interested in serving the wider interests of the European Union. We are deeply convinced that our proposals serve to the maximum possible extent the interests of the European Union as a total, interests with which the interests of our country are inextricably combined with. Thank you very much.
Allow me to clarify that this has been the summary of the report. If some parts of the document have not been detailed, and well, this is due to time. Now, I tried to save us some time because we wanted to allow for the members of the experts group their opinions. Thank you very much.
Να τοποθετηθεί. Λέτε.
Κύριε Γενικέ, ευχαριστούμε πολύ για την...
Thank you very much for the trust. Dear Alekos, we thank you for being able to summarize everything, and we hope that this report might come useful, might come handy. In a few words, Europe suffers from crises that create needs and disparities. Such disparities lead to conflicts, and conflicts might lead us to extremes, and we have seen it very well presented. Citizens are far from being at the focus of attention. So here, the proper response would be cohesion, and cohesion would be the antidote to Europe, treating them through targeted policies, and the other one through horizontal interventions of economic transformation. The goal is common. So we believe that we need to place emphasis on maintaining the spirit of the cohesion rationale that has been the inspiration of the EU, and all this needs to converge with any innovation introduced by the Recovery Fund. However, the Recovery Fund seems to have some asymmetrical advantages vis-à-vis the cohesion policy. And as my friend Yorgos Giannousis tells us, we can give 3 times higher amounts for within the cohesion policy framework. Well, we need to aim at an important financial envelope. However, we need to have reforms in pathogenic areas of the Greek state because beneficiaries are the same. So we hope that with this report we have been able to help, and that all this will be transubstantiated into a policy that will ensure cohesion. Thank you. Hello. Now it's my turn to congratulate our President for the report that has been delivered, and we hope that it's going to help substantially the European Commission. Now, 3 points on my behalf. I believe we're going to have a program, a policy on development and growth after 2027. What we don't know is how much money this will involve, and in what way will it be governed. And as Andrés puts it quite correctly, it is important, if we are to avoid the Euroscepticism, all regions, local governments, etc., need to participate in this growth model. So it is important for us to see that there's going to be a policy, there's going to be a budget, and that there's going to be a governance model that will allow it to be effective. Another important issue, which you mentioned, Andrés, as well, we need to participate in order to avoid borders, to exceed the borders, and to overcome the problems of borders. So the Interreg. This too is important within the framework of the cohesion policy in the period after 2027. Something that has not been mentioned, and I think will have significant impact, is the expansion of Europe. Someone talked about the elephant in the room. There's going to be this enlargement unless the Netherlands tell us that they'll stop everything. So we need to think what this will mean for us, because all of a sudden, all of us who are net recipients will become net contributors in the next programming period. So it is important to have this in mind when we talk about the budget. And thirdly, the budget in Europe is really important. It is currently under discussion. So it is important. And congratulations to Greece, because from the black sheep we've become the white sheep. We were the first ones who filed and were approved, etc. We are doing well, but we need to put an effort regarding the budget. Our president said that with the new generation EU, the amounts grew, but We need such amounts. We need such resources. They were there for crisis, but the crises are still here. They are not to leave tomorrow. So we need this package of the budget. We need to maintain it. We need to keep it. This needs to be said and documented. This is our role, I think. I don't know what the proposals are in Europe, or rather I know, but we try to find ways to go on with the budget. Are we going to proceed to lending? Are we going to be developing same resources? But business as usual with this specific budget and the rural policy and cohesion policy, we cannot go back to that. So it is important for us to think about it, and we already have it in our minds. We need to find ways to document it. Why? Because we do have a continuation of these crises, but we need to find ways in order for the budget to be maintained and even increase. Thank you. Good morning. I'd like to thank you for the honorary invitation to participate in this working group. I'd like to thank Alekos Kritikos, who is excellent in coordinating things. And let me tell you the following. Our mandate was to speak about cohesion policy. Some observers found that we didn't limit ourselves strictly to the subject at hand because, well, we did this consciously because currently there is the RRF, the Resilience and Recovery Fund, and here lies an important real problem. For which policy that leads to convergence should we be interested in? Obviously, those of us who were born and bred in the family of structural funds would be stupid to ignore the existence of this RRF fund, which is a cousin. And we had to take this into consideration as well. It is obvious that Europe needs the whole package. It has been repeatedly mentioned. Need I say more? There have been challenges that have not been solved. So neither the challenges that were the reason why we established the RRF fund have disappeared, nor the cohesion challenges have disappeared. So this needs to be taken into consideration and be mentioned in the respective fora. Another element is that, let us be frank here, there is a discussion as to which of the two implementation methods is the best. Which method of implementation of investment is the best. So let me be frank. I was always in favor of the effort if we are to have a result. So the RRF provides for a cash facilitation to the countries. However, structural funds could also improve advance payments and lead to that same cash facilitation. However, this is not where the problem lies. What I consider a substantial difference is the level of management and monitoring of the implementation of the programs, because implementation bodies are the same. When a body might have one's program under one fund or the other, well, one is bound to come across the same difficulties. But what is important is, in my personal view, This view is based on 30 years of experience in 10 different European countries. Dear friends, at the end of each year, where through the structural funds there had to be expenses objectives met, everyone would see to it that these objectives were met. So I believe that it is much better to be stressed for 6 years rather than having to undergo such a stress for only in the last year, because my experience from countries other than Greece, Italy, etc., is that when you leave everything for the last moment, then you will not be successful. So this is where the Greek side needs to have a compromise between these practices and get the benefits from these two practices. So we are speaking about a sizing up as a team of experts, because we believe that the Recovery Fund was not created in order to cannibalize structural funds. So we think that there should be an organization. I don't like the term demarcation line, and it reminds me of a very bureaucratic approach, and I was never friendly to that. Thank you very much for listening to me. Good morning from me as well. Just 2 minutes I'd like to use to share with you the following. Experience from meetings was not only fertile, but we got to learn something more. We had this interaction with experience, academic knowledge, and this was extremely productive and I think really useful. And I think that this has led to a result that can be well exposed. In this sense, we'd like to thank you for the initiative and the opportunity, Secretary General. A second thing. What was the factor that differentiated this period over the others? It was this awakening experience of the European Union after the pandemic crisis. Well, this signifies a big turn and a big change in the European policy. Let me remind you that in 2008, the stance of the European Commission was austerity, claiming that there was no alternative. How is it possible that we found an alternative nowadays? It has been found because the pandemic was an awakening experience. Without active policies at a European level, we cannot deal with the problems that appear. And what are these problems? Andrés Rodríguez-Pose, whom we'd like to thank for his presence here today, really showed in a very eloquent way that the growth map of Europe is shrinking into a growth corridor from southern Sweden to northern Italy. That is, there is an increase of polarization at a European level, and at the same time, we have a new phenomenon of the increase of the intra-regional polarization. So it is to these problems that the cohesion policy must respond in the coming programming period. The cohesion policy should incorporate not only the geographical dimension, but also the social dimension in its policies. The increase of resources for community budgets that has come through the necessity for the pandemic constitutes a unique opportunity. Why is that? Because it's only through the increase of the community budget resources we can have common interventions at the European level to further strengthen the presence of the European Union in the solution of significant problems and in the provision of goods and services that the citizens need. And all this starts from a language that needs to be better understood, because without a language that can be better understood by everyone, the policy will not be understood. The citizens won't be able to be approached, and we will have inequalities and disparities, and these will lead to further Euroscepticism. So we'll beat Euroscepticism by approaching citizens and by demonstrating the added value of the cohesion policy. Thank you.
Ναι, γεια σας. Έχουμε μια κακή παράδοση στην
Well, we have a bad tradition here in Greece, to start with the positive things. There is polarization, there are shallow institutions, and this leads to a generation of time-confined strategies, evanescent strategies, paradoxical though it may sound. And we lack space in order to produce what we call a balanced consensus. And given that, I believe that the decision of the General Secretary, Dimitris Kalkos, to set up a committee comprising academics, former ministers, former general secretaries, who do not come from his own field, was a brave decision indeed. That's why congratulations are in order, because we know that personal and academic preferences are different compared to Dimitris and Nikki that succeeded me at the Secretariat of the Social Fund. But I have no doubt that trying to claim more funds for the country, I'm sure that they'll do things to the best of their ability. So one element that I would like to publicly acknowledge is the incentive to set up the committee, this committee. Number two, the theory of reforms and their implication reveal that they generate a cost. In the long term, they may be positive for everyone, but in the meantime, there is a cost of change. And that is why when we actually implement reforms during times of financial misery, they tend to fall apart. So the fiscal environment is very important. The single payroll, to say something that all public servants know. And in that sense, the future for cohesion policy discussion is a minefield, because it's taking place in view of the threat of reduction of resources and funds. We can't have a real discussion if it is not absolutely clear that everyone will be in a better position the day after the negotiations. The theory of negotiations tells us that when allies negotiate, what differentiates this negotiation from the negotiation of rivals is that, first of all, you don't have a hidden agenda. You have no reason to conceal your preferences. Let me conclude with a wish. For all of you who know me, I'm a great fan of Keynes. My favorite saying is the one whereby, on the basis of global wisdom, for reasons of posthumous success, it's better to fail with unconventional ways rather than to succeed with conventional ways. So I wish success, even if it is to come in non-conventional ways, and we'll be here to discuss in the future. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ τον κύριο Ιωαννίδη και σε προσωπικό επίπεδο.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ioannidis, and thank you personally for the kind words. I don't think that we're far away For all intents and purposes, the national interests, national within inverted commas, vis-à-vis the PA, are a common goal, or all of us will be claiming. And in policies, of course, there will be differences. I don't think that you're the only one that has different opinions from Mr. Dandolu. We have different opinions, so even if one is in favor of the same political party, there are differences of opinion. Well, I would like to thank all speakers. There is nothing more practical than a good theory, Keynes used to say, for me to quote him as well. These theoretical approaches are important indeed. I find it difficult to say that this was a committee of sages or wise people, but reading your conclusions, I grew wiser. If something emerged, this is the need to have in the Ministry of Finance an independent consultation body, and this is something that we need to look on for the days to come. Straight ahead, we'll go to the next panel. We heard the European perspective, we heard about the national perspective. We may as well give the floor to businesses, to employees, to see their viewpoint. So we have Mr. Papathanasis from the Public Employment Service. We have Mr. Stasinos from the Technical Chamber. And we have Mr. Xerogiannis, very dear indeed. We worked very conducively together in our efforts to have the issuing of calls in the previous time. Mr. Firbas will be moderating. There is something good and something bad at the partnership agreement. The good thing is that we have funds and resources. The bad thing is that we tend to speak a lot. So we have exceeded the time limit, and I'd like to ask for your understanding. If need be, we should stop and connect with the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Margaritis Schinas, who will be addressing us online, and then we'll continue. Mr. Firbas, the floor is yours.
Ευχαριστώ, κύριε Γενικέ. Ευχαριστώ όλους που βρίσκονται εδώ.
Thank you, General Secretary. I would like to thank everyone here today. In my capacity as General Director of the National Coordination Authority, the NCA, the team that proposed its views, the road ahead of us will be difficult. Indeed, we have started early because this dialogue, this discourse will be useful, and it's important for us to build positions. There are many things to talk about. Time is of essence. I don't want to speak longer. I'll just lay down certain rules that we have. First of all, the title of our panel discussion is something you know. We have time limitations, of course. Each one of you is representing here very interesting bodies in trying to fulfill objectives of the program. All three of you are involved in one or another way into the activities of the cousins that were mentioned in the morning. I would like you to freely express your viewpoint, each in their own capacity, because after the year 2027, and just because the rules that were shaped in the meantime, Yorgos, were the following. The governor or PES, DIPA that is, has a prior engagement and he needs to leave at 1:15. So please allow me to give him the floor first since he has to leave. And I had something in mind. I thought that I would give you 10 minutes to share your views, and then we would reserve 5 minutes for Q&A for me to ask a further question. So let me start to begin with Governor of DIPA, the Public Employment Service. Apart from your outlook on everything, what would you change? The lessons learned from a gigantic effort DIPA, the PES, is making in the field of skills, because you're involved in both, in the good sense of the word. What would you change? We'd like your view. Again, housekeeping. My General Secretary has informed me that the Vice President of the European Commission, Mr. Margaritis Schinas, is waiting to listen to what Mr. Papathanasis has to say, and then he'll intervene. So I'll have to interrupt you at 1:30. so that we connect with Mr. Schinas, we can hear his contribution, and then we can come back. I didn't ask you whether you have prior engagements as well, fearing that you would say yes. So thank you ever so much for allowing me to start first, because at 1:30 I need to be at the ministry for another event, and this is rigid. There's nothing I can do about it. Thank you very much for the invitation. As a governor of the Greek Public Employment Service, let me talk to you about social cohesion, skills and employment. There is continuity from the old PA to the Recovery Fund and the new PA. One thing that is very important to acknowledge, in my opinion, is to acknowledge that we find ourselves at a new framework. What is that? Only last week, the first time since 2009, unemployment rate in the country dropped below 10%. This is an important achievement, highlighting the changes made. We've achieved a reduction in 4 years of by 45%. This is the biggest reduction in unemployment in Europe. But we have the second highest unemployment rate, and we have a long way to go before we converge with European average, that is 6.5%. As a governor, day and night, I hear people talk about how difficult it is for businesses to find the right staff. They tell me, they tell the minister, they tell the prime minister, they tell all European leaders. That's why this year is European Skills Year 2023. It's not at random. Europe acknowledges the pivotal role of skills for employment, financial growth and social cohesion. One thing, to cut to the chase, one thing that we see is that there are needs for big reforms. It's not enough to have funds to go by. Funds that do not go hand in hand with reforms which will safeguard the effectiveness and quality of the money invested lead to no good. This was one of the good things in the planning of RRF that said, yes, Greece, will give you 1 billion for skills and training, but you won't have the money as you had it in the past, because in the past you ended up being the rearmost follower of Europe. In the European Skills Index, we were last in matched skills after dozens of millions invested in training. So they said, you'll do this differently. You'll intermarry this with reforms. That's why we had 4921, the new bill, Jobs Again in 2022, for a new outline in Greece. As we know, tabling a law is not enough. Applying the law is everything. That's why we look on the new partnership as an instrument that will build in many ways on what we have managed with the RRF. What have we managed? Not only high absorption and achievement of milestones and goals of Europe, but at the same time pushing the market towards raising the bar in results, outcomes, quality, accountability, evaluation, to have measurable results. That is why we want to see not only the actions that we foster and their outcome in absorption, but we want to truly see the outcome in the labor market. Do job seekers find a job? People taking part in training, do they have a better salary? Are businesses satisfied with the new skills of employees? Have we introduced KPIs and measurements of outputs in our practice so as to see if money is well spent or not? Because all of us here, all of us involved in such matters, know that absorption per se is not tantamount to achieving a policy goal. Therefore, the basic lesson learned, to answer your question, that we need to bear in mind in the delivery of new programs is emphasis and focus on what our actions achieve in the actual labor market. Now, this needs a culture shift. All of us need to look on the evaluation as something good, something non-punitive. We shouldn't regard evaluation as a way to punish. somebody, but to create a mentality of constant improvement. That is, every time even better. Every time we launch an action, we see to it that we don't repeat mistakes of the past, and we're doing it at the moment. We run a huge action for RRF in training. In terms of absorption, we did great. We had big numbers, but we found some dissonances in planning that call for improvement. In the next action, these gaps will have been bridged, and therefore we'll have a higher quality action next time, and so on and so forth. Let me conclude by saying the following. Many times there is an overlapping, there is a fragmentation of competences, of actions in this field. I believe that it's very important for all these to serve a vision and a plan. And that is why the National Council of Skills set up by Law 4921 has issued a national skills strategy. We updated it recently with data from Elstat Energani software, and it will be a dynamic text. You don't lay down a strategy and you put it in a drawer somewhere and you forget about it. If we need to acknowledge something, all of us, it is that the changes in economy, technology, the labor market are so rapid that you cannot set a 5-year plan and fail to change it and update it. Constantly, you need new data, new changes to be fed in this plan to enrich it. I am optimistic by nature, and I believe that if one observes all the indicators that we have at the moment, all the funds that Greece has, but first and foremost, the political willingness for reform and the willingness to do away with bad practices of the past that have kept the country behind, I believe that this is a golden opportunity to turn over a new leaf, to become a very modern European state, and to make sure that we act and be able to measure what we do, evaluate ourselves, and grow better all the time. To this end, the partnership agreement and the group of Mr. Skalkos, Mrs. Dandolu, that we've been working with are doing their best. We've had an excellent collaboration, and I trust that we'll do the best for the country. The Public Employment Service, DIPA, will play a pivotal role, will have substantial change, and money will be used effectively. Thank you very much again for allowing me to speak first. I do apologize that I need to leave without listening to my interlocutors who will speak after me, and all the best to all of us for this national challenge.
Thank you very much. Well, I cannot but make a question, but we don't have time. Okay. Okay, we'll have the opportunity to speak about it later. Okay, I heard that you're saying that there is a willingness to make changes. And to me, the critical word is the coordination of actions. And as a major beneficiary in the area of skills, etc., I think that you'll be able to guide through these changes. So thank you very much. Thank you. I do apologize for having to leave. So I'll give the floor now. We do have time for one more speaker before we interrupt for Mr. Margaritis Skinas. So moving on to the entrepreneurship part. A representative of one of the official socio-economic partners of the country, my friend Yorgos Xirogiannis. So you're going to share with us your own personal views as well as the views of the Hellenic Industries Association vis-à-vis competitiveness, what you think and what you would like to have for the period after 2027 vis-à-vis cohesion, the funds, central or decentralized management. You have the floor for 10 minutes. Thank you very much, Yanis. I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, it's better. Yes, it's better now. So, thank you, dear Yanis, Mr. Fibas. Thank you very much for the invitation, Ms. Nandolik, etc. I won't take the 10 minutes. I'd like to share the time with the technical chamber of Greece representative. So I will focus on two words, development and welfare. I think that we talked about cohesion, but regarding growth and the welfare and well-being, etc., and prosperity, I think that these are important for businesses. Allow me to put questions that need to be answered in the future. So, for the past 40 years, calculating the amounts that Greece has received following its participation, we are talking about 240, corrects the speaker, billion. 6 billion a year to converge with the performances of the EU to cover the gaps of to cover the gaps as a country. Have we met this objective? Have we achieved convergence with the EU? Have we met the objectives on the basis of the amounts that we have received? Are we satisfied by the way with which such resources have been utilized in order to achieve growth and prosperity? We can have many different interpretations. However, the indicators of the EU are quite hard, and this doesn't have anything to do with the good horse we are following as a country in the past 4 years. We are in good condition with self-confidence and great perspectives, but in the way we utilize these resources for the past 40 years, well, the indicators show that we haven't done what other countries have achieved. So the questions I'd like to put to show how the new framework will help us achieve prosperity and growth are 5. Do we have an efficient public administration without red tape and multiplicity of laws that would lead to a favorable business environment? The indicators give us the results. Do we have competitiveness, innovation, technology-intensive initiatives able to do with the competition in the European market? Let me give you a figure. Portugal, 20 years ago, was ranking much lower than us, and nowadays it has 2,000 more medium enterprises and many more large enterprises. So imagine what would happen in Greece if we had such businesses. A third question, do we have investments with adequate domestic added value? And I'm not referring to importing spares to invest, but rather produce our own spare parts, etc., to invest in the era of the green transition. A fourth question, do we have structures, procedures, and training programs that would lead to the human resources creation and professions of need for high skills that will take us to the new era? It was mentioned earlier in the competitiveness indicators. For our talent, we are ranking really low. And the fifth question, do we have that social cohesion through the lifting of disparities and inequalities, through the support of our fellow human beings with structures to support society or vulnerable groups in remote areas of the country? to these. These are five questions that need to be discussed, and we need to see how the targeting, the objectives, and the tools will be used in order to achieve growth and prosperity. So I give you the opportunity to take this question. No, I'll do the moderation, okay? Yes, very quickly. The response is no to the five questions you put. But the crucial part is what are the proposals and what are the parts that we can touch upon? Because some of these are in the broader environment where the partnership and partnership agreement and RRF programs need to be implemented. And this is the opportunity for the president of the technical chamber to answer. Whenever we think of the technical chamber, we think about infrastructure. But since the technical chamber does hold a broader role as an advisor to the state in a series of subjects, not only on infrastructure, I think that you might have a view on procedures for the awards of contracts, etc. The technical chamber, as of late, has undertaken a series of roles as a beneficiary, to put it simply, in the area of implementation of partnership agreement projects and the RRF programs. So I'd like to hear your view as to this experience in the past few years and what can change for 2027. Mrs. Stasinos. Yes, I'll start with something, and I thank my fellow speaker here. I'll start with three things. I keep on referring to that in almost all my presentations and speeches. The most important factor, and I will repeat it every time until people understand it, the most important factor nowadays is one: time. You told us that we need to finish quickly, but let me tell you that time is the most important factor that will allow us to have the results that we want for our country. Unfortunately, we're not doing well with that, with time management. Why did we have the technical chamber as an advisor? Because the time was not adequate for the RRF implementation. We started having many different projects, and we might be one of the speediest country, but let me point this as well. Well, is the money put in a good place? This is important, because we don't meet the objectives that other countries meet with the same funds, because the money we get is not utilized in the best way. Why is that? Because ultimately, if we are to achieve the time goals, the timelines, we absorb the money wherever there is the possibility to absorb them. So we use this as a criterion, who is the first to absorb the money. This is important, but this is not the most important thing. So we need to solve effectiveness issues. The technical chamber might be entity number one that puts in practice this approach. We prepare systems to accelerate procedures. We are preparing the digital map. We digitize all the records, etc. That is, we do away with red tape. Let me share with you a personal view of mine. What do we need to do to simplify procedures before digitizing them? We should not be digitizing red tape. So before we start the digitalization process, we need to simplify processes. Let me tell you that we had partnership agreements that were red tape, and now our RF has become worse. So we need to get approval from the special service. At the same time, we ask for approval from the Court of Audit, etc. Why do we need to duplicate work, etc.? We're talking about a huge amount of procedures. We have the red tape that we have introduced. And regarding the mismanagement avoidance issue, okay, but we have brought more red tape and it has become worse. This I say because I have to deal with that on a daily basis through micromanagement. This might not be our role, but we need to be effective. So, we need to make changes in order to remove red tape, and we need to allow the public sector, the state, to do outsourcing. Let me give you the most successful example in the country. We have the building inspectors. In the past, there used to be a state employee who would go there. Anyone now can go from a private registry, private professionals registry, that, well, one is randomly picked. This is the best thing. When things are objective, things are better. Because in this way we avoid kickbacks, etc. So we need to be objective. In parallel, we need to have procedures, outsourcing procedures. For instance, it takes time for environmental licensing, etc. Outsource it. Get engineers' registries or experts' registries, etc., and let the state have a more executive role. So, if we are to hire a civil servant, well, it takes years. It takes, yes, 7 years. 7 years. So, this is not productive. It takes me 6 or 7 years for me to hire someone, and after 6 months following being hired, this person will leave because of retirement. So, well, everyone tries in a service, etc. Whatever they do, they try to manage better what the previous person did. No, this doesn't work that way. We need to think out of the box, change things. We cannot be a bit better than the previous one. Nothing will evolve that way. So we don't have either the companies to absorb the resources, nor the services to allow for approvals, etc. Let me share with you one last example. Right now we're doing something that only a few people have understood. We try to have town planning, city planning procedures. By the end of the year, we will have completed 226 tenders for local urban planning procedures. So think about that. We only have one committee. How many objections? One has the committee received. So we'll try to do this within 3 years' time. The ministry, it would take the ministry 10 years to have 30 urban plans. So we will do this in the 1/25th of the time that the ministry will do it. We're going to make it, but what this tells you, this is an extreme effort. Currently, there are no appropriate scientists, no services appropriate, no employees, etc. And the resources that are directed from the Cohesion Fund for training, education, etc., are not put in good use. This needs to bring forward a result. Currently, there are technical companies that cannot undertake the projects in Greece nor absorb the resources. There is no staff. So we need to talk about that and tell the truth. Let us not claim that everything is perfect. We have perfect absorption, etc. And this is the super opportunity.
Is inciting me to ask, what is the secret of having so many tenders with one committee? I'll write it in a book because I can't say, says the speaker. And with one objection, lo and behold, I don't know where you are keeping all the concessionaires, the contractors. Well, it's interesting. My question to you is will you stay here for us to listen to Mr. Schinas? And they have a 5-minute Q&A? Do you have time, Yorgos? Barely. I think we need to close. No, I think we close here. Okay, we may as well stop here. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the invited guests on the panel for the interesting views expressed. If only we had more time. We'll be in touch. Mr. Xerianis is in a hurry to leave as well. So thank you. Thank you very much. Evaluation, evaluation, evaluation. Coordination, coordination, coordination. If we keep repeating it, it will happen. Okay, do we have the live connection with the Vice President of the European Commission?
Καλησπέρα και απολογίες για την καθυστέρηση.
Good afternoon and apologies for the delay. Good afternoon to everyone. No problem. So, I'm starting. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity you've given me to share some thoughts of mine with you from a distance vis-à-vis cohesion policy and the future of regional development. As you know, these are domains that I've worked for more than 30 years, and I've seen regional policy and the use of the tools for its pursuit in a long period of time. It goes without saying that I'm sharing these thoughts as the Greek commissioner, but also as a practitioner that has seen how important these tools are and has also seen their growth footprint in society and economy. Of course, we cannot have this discussion unless we start with an appraisal of the overall framework of Europe at the moment, and as we speak. A framework which is quite alarming, a framework that is not only confronted with the challenges of digital transition and the transition to AI, artificial intelligence, but a framework that is mainly related to the two wars that are in progress in our neighborhood. It has to do with the change of the global system, with the appearance of many new regional powers, which do not contribute to global governance ideas of positive participation, but try unilaterally and using force to get as big a piece of the pie of global governance as they can. And we see the alarming rise of populism, of extreme political ideas, exploiting the insecurity of citizens and the prolongation of the geopolitical crisis that have an effect on economy as well. So in this volatile, dark, unpredictable geopolitical and geofinancial landscape, we are called upon to discuss cohesion and regional development policies, which are, of course, local, but apart from the growth potential, they also have a systemic contribution to what we have been accustomed to calling the European way of life, or to what Emmanuel Macron said when he delivered his speech in Sorbonne, a Europe that protects. A Europe that protects is not only tantamount to borders, security, migration, public health, but also cohesive societies. And cohesive societies go through the policies of cohesion and regional development. Now, coming to Greece and the importance of cohesion policies for our country. It's not by accident that part of the public discourse and all the political cycles that I've come to know is the right use of European funds, but especially in this time junction. This traditional argument gains a wider significance for two reasons. Number one, in the 42 years of the country's participation in European institutions, our country has never had the luck to have at its disposal such important community funds to be channeled into regional development. Not only the 21 billion euros of the partnership agreement, but another partnership agreement, which is the national plan from the Recovery Fund. So here we have an unprecedented junction affording us a singular opportunity for a more innovative, more competitive, better adjusted growth potential, more adapted to global economy. This makes the right use of funds very important at present. If in the past we were unforgivable to miss growth opportunities, with the width and the firepower that we have available today will be 2 times inexcusable. The second parameter that renders this discussion important for our country is the fact that our country is in a spectacular recovery orbit. Passing from the last desk of the classroom next to the radiator, as the French say, we have now started sitting at the first desk. The obligation of a good student in classroom is, of course, more demanding than the obligations of an underachiever. So we have more opportunities to show that we can make it. I would like to publicly acknowledge the importance of the fact that Greece was the first member state to have entered into a partnership agreement with the European Commission for the partnership agreement of the current period. This was a big national success, which was not sufficiently discussed in our country. A success which, of course, reflects both the former and the present leadership of the Ministry of Finance and Development, my friends whom I'll mention by name because they're worth a reconnaissance, Georgiadis, Tsakiris, Thodoros Kyliakakis, and the present leadership in a new ecosystem of architecture, government architecture. So, having mentioned the previous ministers, I'll mention now Kostis Hatzidakis, Deputy Minister Mr. Papathanasis, and of course the indefatigable Secretary Mr. Alekos, who is at the engine room of the cohesion and regional growth policy, very much related to community funds. This entire team worked in an exemplary way to enable us to become top students, having started as underachievers, and I believe that they have every reason to feel proud of their achievement and, of course, feel how important the responsibility is for what is to come. The discussion on the future of cohesion policies has started already. I believe that the prevalent idea here in all relevant discussions is the phrase "no region left behind," meaning that no European region should be left marginalized. Economic inequalities among European regions constitute a structural problem, not only related to local societies, but related to the overall undermining of European economic competitiveness, and also related to the rules of economic governance, which, as you know, are being discussed. I personally feel optimistic that this new agreement of Greece, the partnership agreement between Greece and Europe for the new ESPA, the new framework, will be indicative of the paradigm shift and the turn towards this new model that we mentioned before, the competitive, extroverted one, related to an anthropocentric growth. Emphasis on locality is also important. 1/3 of the allocations for cohesion policies in the present period will be channeled to Greek regional programs. This is a big opportunity for regions to find their role in the overall landscape of growth. Now, talking about the future, yes, indeed, we need to prepare the cohesion policy of the future after 2027, embarking on a discussion. We've just started. In fact, I see that in Greece too. I don't know, I'm not sure how you call it, the Kritikos committee, how do you call this committee, the experts group, that has recruited members who know what is at stake in the relevant policies. The same discussion has started here in the Commission. I am sure that Themis Christophidou shared with you some thoughts earlier today. We want the discussion for what lies ahead after 2027 to be based on two pillars. It needs to be centered on locality. It needs to be a policy clearly illustrating and showcasing regional growth priorities. And a second pillar that we already focused on in the current period, but I want to see take off in the next one, is the upgrading of human resources, upskilling, reskilling. I'll come back to this in a while. Here at the Commission, this discussion for the future of cohesion policy will be intensified in the near future for sure. And it is one of the first priority matters that will be discussed after the Euro elections of June by the new committee, and the new committee formed next December. So, these were the thoughts that I had about the future. I would like to conclude by making three basic conclusions. And thank you very much for asking me to close the session. So, the three conclusions reached are that in this narrative of the definitive and radical change of the role of Greece in Europe, let's call it the Greece is back narrative, the regional policy and cohesion policy constitute perhaps the most crucial realm where the sustainability of this comeback will be based and measured, not only because of the funds and allocations, but because of the regulatory interventions accompanying the funds for regional cohesion. So this positive regulatory and mentality needs to give a positive added value to the country, not only in project management and local interventions, but in society as well. It is like feeding a new software in the PC that will make the difference, not only in terms of running a specific program, but will be beneficial for our PC, generally speaking, our computer. The second conclusion is that whatever we do in the regional policy and cohesion policy needs to be understood by local societies, the recipients of projects and interventions, by citizens themselves, so as not to miss out on any opportunity that connects Europe with the improvement of social and economic level of citizens. To put it more simply, it would be a howling shame for the wealth of our interventions and funding to allow populists, Eurosceptics and nationalists to build narratives that are rejective of Europe, discarding Europe in areas which are actually helped by Europe, catalytically so. And we need to be the ones to make the connection. Nobody else will do it but us. It needs to be us. Interventions need to include this dimension of the local European effect on local communities. I'm not talking about propaganda here, but I'm talking about explanations, dialogue, opportunities like the one here today, so that everyone can understand precisely how European money is spent in their local place. Conclusion number 3. This talk about the future, of course, needs to concern what we did well, the teachings of the past, that is, the lessons learned, but we also need to be brave and acknowledge what we didn't do well. We need to sufficiently appraise the lessons learned, the experience, the failures, and I don't think that we need to look onto this with a sense of guilt. We need to look on that with a sense of self-confidence. So, I'm urging all of us to learn from the mistakes of the past, and I would like to touch upon 2 such lessons. One is the fragmentation of many competencies and structures in the state that are directly related to the way in which we fund relevant actions. A notable example here that I happen to know well because of my portfolio is vocational education and training. We have major fragmentation in VET structures in the state. We have unprecedented funds for VET training from the ESF and the National Recovery Plan. It would truly be a pity, a howling shame, not to find a way to make fragmentation a counter paradigm that is rather a negative paradigm that we need to overcome. We need to be more flexible, agile, dynamic, federal in our VET training, and not follow a way that merely reflects the many different facilities that are scattered here, there, and everywhere. And another message, perhaps the last one, that needs to concern us, especially now as we are planning the future, is that the partnership agreement and all community funding in regional programs and cohesion programs should not only regard those that are in the system, those that live near universities, for instance, those that go along with employer organizations or trade unions, all those that have learned to move and use their acquaintances. The partnership agreement needs to be relevant to all those who are not in the system, the ones that have few opportunities, the ones that live in outermost regions, on islands, people who are not lucky enough to have somebody opening the doors for them. So in the planning of the programs for the future, we need to take into account this other Greece that is truly worth opportunities, and it has an institutionally safeguarded right to get them. So this is what I wanted to share with you. You know, in his interventions, after the accession of the country to the European Union, the leader of our nation back then insisted that the accession be the key to enable Greece to open all the doors to solve the big questions that concern it. That key, the way that the leader of our country had envisaged it back then, has changed. It's not the institutional and geopolitical safeguarding of the country, but it's a key to unlocking whatever leads to the improvement of daily lives of Greek men and women, vocational education and training, education, health, and you hold the key. Most of you in the room hold this key. Thank you again.
Ωραία. Ξανακαθίσουμε λίγο πίσω για να συνεχίσουμε.
So we go on.
Λοιπόν, πλησιάζουμε σιγά σιγά στο...
So slowly we're reaching the end of today's event, and it is up to you to evaluate and assess it. And personally, I believe that this has been more than successful because we've heard about all the subjects that had to be touched upon, some maybe more, and exceeding the narrow framework of the cohesion policy. However, we have found more about what is at stake vis-a-vis the future growth plan. I'll be really brief. I think that we're all tired. It's been many hours. The first thing I'd like to say is, well, I'd like to warmly thank Alekos, Kritikos, and the colleagues, the members of the experts group. I call them colleagues because I consider them as my own colleagues. It is up to each and every one of us to evaluate the content of this work. This is your own work. You might use it as best as you feel appropriate. And of course, in the ministry site, we will upload it. We will have the necessary publicity because this has to be opened up to citizens. We won't stop at that point. There will be future actions. We will be completing a platform that will put forward a questionnaire as to the cohesion policy after 2037. I want to believe that we didn't do anything less than our partners in this conjuncture. Maybe we have done something more than them because this is what we believe is best. The cohesion policy, particularly for Greece, has played a very important part, and we think that this has been understood well by the people. We've talked about the great rates of publicity and acceptance of the partnership agreement projects. I was really impressed by a survey last year on the question, what do you think the EU can be matched to? Co-financed projects were up there in the third position together with the monetary union. To me, This means a lot. This means that citizens want to have tangible results of the expression of the European solidarity to them. And such examples are present. They are there, they are the projects, they are the actions. I don't need to enumerate them. The first ones who need to exercise criticism on our work are we. We need to be as strict as possible. Of course, we should not castigate ourselves. We have heard about low efficiency of projects despite the fact that there's high absorption, but I have to open a parenthesis here. We should not underestimate the absorption issue, because this was not always the case. It was the case always at the era of Mr. Yannousis, but it wasn't always that case. So we need to have high absorption, we need to have resources coming in, and then we're going to find out how these will be better utilized. So from my own data, I cannot tell you that the cohesion policy resources have not been utilized properly. In the past years, we would be in the middle category of those utilizing their resources. We need to do better, but we are not ranking last. We do utilize resources. I think many of the people have understood. So we had the mobile COVID units during the pandemic. We had special aids given to specific population groups to support employment and social cohesion, kindergarten vouchers, crash vouchers, hotlines, infrastructure for women who have been victims of violence, etc. Of course, we could have done more. We could have had more innovation on more finance on innovation. But anyway, this is my personal view. We are not far from the achievement of consensus, which is something necessary. So I believe that our country will be able to do something positive in the cohesion policy field after 2027. We have heard about what we need to do. Europe is a ship that takes its time to turn, but it is turning, and I can understand that it's turning towards the correct direction. The issues of simplification of procedures and flexibility and agility, we have seen that we can perform miracles. During the pandemic we saw that, and this is a discussion to be held and be essential. We have heard about territoriality issues. We've seen it through the COVID pandemic and the energy crisis case. It has to be pointed out that some resources have not made it to where their needs were higher. There were significant differentiations. In many cases in our country, there was an intensification of disparities and inequalities. If something has been demonstrated from the pandemic case, it was that there is the territoriality, locality issue. This has been also mentioned by the General Director, Ms. Christophidou, and this is a direction towards which we should be going. Now, the relationship with the RRF, well, I'm not that interested in that. Not that I take this for granted or I am not interested in that, but we need to be interested in the overall budget and financing that we have available. I won't be that pessimistic to say that the resources will be problematic after 2027. We'll see what will happen there, because there is the negotiations period that will be coming in. I remember back when we had negotiations with Mr. Firbas, etc. We got what we wanted vis-a-vis the cohesion policy, and we were found with the RRF as well. So the thing is to find a way to combine these tools in the best possible way. And to keep the positive elements of the Recovery and Resilience Fund and the Cohesion Fund and not keep the negative elements of both funds. The main negative thing about the RRF is that there are projects in cooperation with the services of the Commission and the institutions, and in the partnership agreement we have acquired the right to be able to make joint decisions as to the directions to follow. I believe that we should even promote that further, to become owners of our own program, to be as less as possible bound by the general directions of the Commission. We need to set our own priorities vis-à-vis the general direction as well as in the implementation. We need to place emphasis on the results. We can have indicators and markers and put less weight on the procedures. How am I going to do that? Well, we need to discuss it. I apologize to the committee for preempting their views, but it is my own personal view, and I can commit that the deliverable of this committee will be examined in the discussion from the European Experts Group with dear Mr. Pose, and I think that this work not only will not be left unexploited, but it will lead to further work. So I'd like to thank you. This has been an unprecedented experience. We don't often see the phenomenon whereby people put in their time, their effort, and I was witness to that. No one refused to participate. There were no clarifications asked as to what we are trying to do. They all understood because they have been through similar experiences, and they understand that it is now the proper time to check what will happen with the cohesion policy. Of course, the cohesion policy is not only about the money, which is welcome, but it is about the way with which we work. We work in a European way. In the partnership agreement, we used to know about the strict timetables, milestones, in cooperation with the European Commission, and we have been impregnated by this way of thinking. So this works at many different levels, at a political level, at a societal level. This brings us closer to Europe. Europe understands that we are its partners. We shape jointly our future. And this is a big thing. And it has been shown by Mr. Pose when he referred to the Euroscepticism votes being associated to the good depiction of the projects of the cohesion policy. And it is not a random finding that this is placed at the same level as the monetary union. So citizens understand that cohesion policy is all about common values, respect, solidarity, and of course we'll have the resources, the funds. They too are important, in particular for a country that has been traumatized following a multi-annual crisis to be followed by the pandemic. The economy is running fast and growing fast, so we need to have the resources for public investments in order to have the necessary financing support. So I'll stop here. I'd like to thank you all for your presence here. It's a big thing to have you remain seated for so many hours, and I wish you success, and I would like to see you all participate in the dialogue that is just now beginning. Thank you.